Hey guys, thanks so much for clicking on this video. I know a lot of you use it to help you fall asleep, so before we get started, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're from and what time you're watching this. Alright, lights off, eyes closed, and let your imagination follow along with the story. This is probably karma for always complaining that my town is boring and needs more excitement. Well, I take it back. Back when this happened, I was living the classic unemployed teenager life, staying up all night, sleeping through the day. We moved into a new house about 6 months earlier, and our new kitchen was way smaller than the old one. We had to ditch our big freezer and make do with a small fridge in the kitchen. We got a new freezer and shoved the old one out in the garage, which was at the far end of our back garden. I'd often find myself trudging outside at some ungodly hour, like 3 in the morning, to grab food. One night in particular is burned into my memory, even though I'm usually terrible at remembering details like this. I got out to the garage, clutching my usual knife. Don't judge, I'm a paranoid wimp. The garage door doesn't have a handle, just a lock. You unlock it, and the door swings open on its own, which always creeps me out, especially since the freezer is a few feet from the door. You're basically standing with your back to the open doorway. Before I could even lift the freezer lid, it's one of those chest freezers with a lid you pull up, I noticed something weird. There was an ID card just sitting there on top of the freezer. It wasn't one of ours, not from anyone in my family. It showed some average-looking guy, white mid-30s, with a lot of stubble. I can't remember the name exactly, maybe Colin or Graham, something like that. Looking back, I really should have taken a picture of it. I started getting seriously creeped out. I didn't recognize this guy at all. I'd never seen him before. I looked around the garage and spotted something else that didn't belong, a bright yellow work vest with silver stripes. It wasn't ours either. It's just me, my mom, and my 2 younger siblings in the house, so there's no way it belonged to any of us. At this point, I was beyond freaked out. Then I tried to rationalize it, thinking it might be my mom's boyfriend's stuff. She'd recently gotten back into dating, so maybe it was his. I decided to wait until morning to ask her, just to be sure. When I showed her the ID and the vest, she had no clue what I was talking about. Now I was really losing it. I dragged her out to the garage to show her, and this is the part that still makes my blood run cold. They were gone. Vanished. Hasta la vista. I'm not gonna lie, I might have peed myself a little. It wasn't my mom's stuff. She'd barely woken up when I asked her. ID cards don't just sprout legs and walk off, so either I was going insane or someone had come back in the middle of the night to grab their things. My mom thought I was joking or making it up. I was ready to let it go, to pretend it never happened, but a few days later, something else happened. I was walking to the shop down the road to grab some tea when someone called my name. I turned around, expecting a friend, but this middle-aged guy came up to me, pressed a wrapper into my hand, grinned, and walked off. I was confused for a second until it hit me. It was the damn guy from the ID card. Colin or Graham or whatever his name was. I didn't know him, but he sure as hell knew my name. I was near tears, honestly. I ran home without getting anything and told my mom, but surprised, she didn't believe me. I didn't know what to do or how to feel. I never told anyone else about it. It's been a few months, and I've since moved in with my sister. I haven't seen that guy since, and I've gone back to the house a few times. Looking back, maybe it was just one of my mom's friends who knew me. Or maybe it wasn't. Let me start by saying this story is 100% true, and you could probably find it online if you looked. I live in Oklahoma, but I'm not comfortable sharing the exact area where these events took place. I began working as a 911 operator and dispatcher during my senior year of college. After 3 months of training, I was assigned to the night shift as a dispatcher for a relatively small county. The shift was usually slow, mostly handling medical emergencies or suspicious activity calls, nothing too wild. I'm a pretty thick-skinned person, so when things did go wrong, I could brush it off and stay professional. But about 8 months into the job, everything changed. It started on a Friday night around 2 a.m. I got a 911 call, and as protocol dictates, If the caller hangs up and doesn't answer when we call back, we dispatch a unit for a welfare check, known as a 10 to 90. This happened a few times a week, and it was almost always an accidental dial. This time, after I requested the 10 to 90, the responding officer called me on his personal phone. He was at the address I'd given, but he said the house was abandoned and boarded up. I double-checked the address, and it matched. Assuming it was a glitch in the computer mapping system, we let it go and didn't think much of it. The very next night, around the same time, another call came in from the same number. I recognized it because the last 4 digits were 4,400. Easy to remember. It was another hang-up. After trying to call back several times with no answer, I had to dispatch another officer. It was policy, and I wasn't about to risk my job. The officer said he'd check it out, but never did. A few hours later, he called from the cruiser and said it wasn't worth the trouble, probably just a phone line error. We agreed, and I moved on with my duties. But something fell off. Maybe it was the eerie silence on those calls, not just empty, but the kind where you feel someone's there listening. It gnawed at me for the rest of the shift and even followed me home. The worst came on the third night, my last shift before a much-needed vacation. Around the same time, the phone rang, and that 4,400 number flashed on the screen. I was nervous for no clear reason, even though I told myself it was nothing. 911, what's your emergency? Silence. But this time, it didn't disconnect right away. Hello, this is 911 emergency. After a few more seconds of quiet, a weak voice answered, a young boy. Yes, he said softly. Okay, what's your address? I asked, even though we're supposed to confirm it regardless. The address on the screen was clearly wrong, given the abandoned house. His response made my heart drop. You know what the address is? There was a policeman here the other night. Please send another. I was shaken, but tried to stay calm. Okay, what's your name? I asked. Daniel, he said. I just want to go home. Okay, Daniel, we're going to get you home. Tell me exactly what's going on. Silence again, then a dial tone. I called back immediately while my co-workers dispatched units. No answer on the first try. On the second, a harsh, gravelly voice answered, spitting out, "It's true." Before hanging up, I was in near shock. I kept calling back, but no one picked up. I relayed that a child might be in danger, with an adult male possibly at the location, and we sent more units. For about 40 minutes, the longest 40 minutes of my life, I heard nothing. The anxiety was crushing. When the update finally came, it was worse than I could have imagined. The officers had broken into the house, forcing through boards and locks. The place was empty. All they found was a fresh pack of gum and an old telephone. Weeks later, I learned the truth from the news. The boy, a 10-year-old named Daniel, had been kidnapped by a known child predator and held in that abandoned house for weeks. He'd somehow managed to get an old phone line working and called 911 when the predator was asleep, seizing what little chance he had. It breaks me to say this, but Daniel was found dead. The monster who killed him was never caught. This was the darkest experience of my life, and I doubt anything will ever surpass it. I can still hear that boy's voice clear as day, and it fuels my nightmares even 4 years later. I quit my job as a 911 dispatcher soon after. Sharing this feels therapeutic, but I pray every day that justice will be served. I've never shared this story widely because it feels too close to fictional tales out there. Maybe the concept is just creepy, or maybe this event inspired those stories. I don't know. What I do know is that it's completely true. My grandfather showed me newspaper clippings about it when I was a kid. This happened in the late 1960s, long before I was born, when my father was just a boy. My father's family had a swing set in their backyard. He was an early riser, often waking up before everyone else to go outside and play. There was nothing unusual about hearing him get up and head out that morning. The familiar creak of the swing set echoed through the house. But when my father opened the back door and ran into the foggy mist, he froze. There, gently swaying on one of the swings, was a hunched-over figure, an old lady. In their Polish household, they called her a babushka because of the headscarf tied around her head. She clutched a small brown paper bag tightly in her arms. They were out there for a while. Eventually, my grandfather woke up and went to the kitchen for a glass of water. As he stood at the sink, he glanced out the window and saw them in the backyard. The woman was clearly talking to my father. She leaned in, whispered something in his ear, and my father got up to head toward the house. The woman rose from the swing and followed him. My grandfather hurried to the back door, opened it, and let his son pass while keeping his eyes on the woman. According to my grandfather, she stopped in her tracks, turned around, and sat back on the swing. She smiled at him and resumed swinging. My grandfather shut the door, locked it, and told my father to go to his room. Then he called the police. The woman stayed there the whole time, never leaving, just swinging calmly. When the police arrived and spoke to her, they looked into her bag. As you might guess, since this story feels like something out of a creepypasta, it contained nothing but knives and rope. A ridiculous number of knives, apparently, including specialty ones for boning, carving, and butchering. My father wasn't around much when I was growing up, so I heard this story from my grandfather. Even as a kid, I didn't believe him at first. It sounded too wild. But he went and fetched 2 yellowed newspaper clippings and an excerpt from the local paper. They mentioned the lady, the knives, the rope, the swing set, everything. It's always struck me as strange, especially later in life when I came across similar stories online. It seems like a popular concept, but I know this happened in real life. My father never shared much about what they talked about. He did say that what she whispered to him as he got up was something like, "Go inside so we can play with the whole family." He never elaborated beyond that, even though they were out there for a while. My father passed away when I was 15, and since he wasn't a big part of my life, I never got more details from him. My aunt and grandfather told the story many times, though. My grandfather always seemed the most shaken by it. He didn't like the way she looked or how she just waited for the police without running. He said my grandmother called her Baba Yaga, like the demon lady from old country folklore who ate children. Oddly enough, some say that's where the word babushka comes from. After that incident, they took down the swing set, and my father wasn't allowed to play outside alone in the mornings anymore. It's probably one of the creepiest stories I've ever heard, and it stuck with me vividly since I was young. No matter how old I get, early morning fogs still creep me out. I'm always half expecting to see her. This happened during Thanksgiving break. My friend Angela and I were high school acquaintances but grew really close in college. We often carpooled between our university and our hometown, a 5-hour drive. At the end of Thanksgiving break, we set out around 11 p.m. for the trip back. About 3 hours in, Angela, who was driving, said she was feeling sleepy. Instead of stopping in the middle of nowhere to switch drivers, I decided to keep her engaged by talking. We got into a deep conversation and, for fun, started Snapchatting bits of the road trip with the car's flashlight on. I know, it was dumb. After some laughing and Snapchatting, we noticed police sirens flashing behind us. Great, it was 2 a.m., and we were getting pulled over. The officers stayed in their car for a few minutes, which felt odd, but we didn't think much of it. 2 cops then approached, whispering something to each other as they walked toward us. One went to Angela's window, the other to mine. "Hi there, ladies," the one by Angela's window said with a creepy smile. "How y'all doing tonight?" Angela, unsuspecting, replied, "Good." She asked why we'd been pulled over. "Going over the speed limit," he said. But we'd been Snapchatting just before, and Angela was deliberately driving under the limit to stay safe. Confused, she just said, "Okay," and asked if he needed any documentation. He said no. Meanwhile, the cop by my window signaled for me to lower it, and I did. He started making suggestive comments and gestures like pointing his flashlight toward my lap while smiling, saying things like, "Those are some long legs," and, "Oh, so it's just you two? What are you doing out here in the middle of nowhere?" His questions had nothing to do with the stop and felt completely out of line for a police officer. The first cop asked if we were college students, and we said yes, mentioning we were heading to the university. That was a mistake. We weren't even close to the direction of our school. He smirked and said to the other cop, "College girls, huh?" with that same eerie smile. By now, We were thoroughly creeped out and just wanted to get out of there, but they wouldn't let us go. They kept trying to make conversation, dropping weird, suggestive remarks like, "Y'all know there's a prison nearby. Sure hope nothing happens to you ladies. And do you think anyone would know if something happened out here all alone on this road?" All while smiling. I was in shock, unable to believe this was happening. These were supposed to be the people we trust, yet here we were trying to escape them for our own safety. Wanting to end it, I asked if we were getting a ticket. The cop by Angela's window said, "No, but I'll give you a verbal warning." As he spoke, I could feel the other cop staring at me. He scribbled something in his notepad and said, "Y'all be careful now. Wouldn't want anything bad to happen to you pretty ladies, right?" The officer by my window then tried to open my door out of nowhere. Thankfully, the doors were locked, and my window wasn't low enough for him to reach in and unlock it manually. I froze, staring at him as he stared back, offering no explanation. Angela quickly started the car, said, "Thank you, have a good night," and sped off. We didn't call our parents right away. It was the middle of the night, and we didn't want to worry them. Instead, we called Angela's boyfriend, who was waiting for us at the university, and had asked to be updated if anything happened. We drove in silence for about 30 minutes, constantly checking the rearview mirror to make sure they weren't following us. I finally broke the silence and asked Angela why they'd stopped us if we hadn't done anything wrong. Then it hit us. They must have seen we were two girls because of the stupid flashlight I'd used while Snapchatting. They probably stayed in their car to confirm it was just us before approaching. Their vibe was so unsettling, and I wouldn't be surprised if they'd been planning something awful, maybe even rape or worse. I can only imagine what might have happened if the doors had been unlocked. The lessons here are clear. 1. Don't do road trips in the dead of night, especially if you're women. 2. Don't blindly trust cops. There are good ones, but there are bad ones too. And 3. Always make sure someone knows where you are. This story slipped my mind until recently. One of my dogs, Lady, was put down due to cancer, so I've been spending a lot of time thinking about my two dogs. Today, I was reflecting on memories with my younger dog, Ginger, who's still with us, and a particular event came rushing back. This happened over 9 years ago when I was in the 5th grade. I had just gotten Ginger, who was 3 or 4 months old at the time, and I was absolutely obsessed with her. My family decided to get a second dog after I begged them for 2 years to give Lady, our other dog, a companion. Lady was about 2 years old then, the most well-behaved dog I've ever known, and she still holds that title even after her passing. The only time she ever acted up was when someone came onto our property. For such a little dog, she was fearless. One evening, I was sitting with my mother and my 2 younger sisters, who were 7 and 4, when the doorbell rang. It was late in the afternoon, maybe 6 or 7 o'clock. Lady leapt off the couch and bolted to the door, barking like crazy. Ginger tried to keep up with her big sister, but couldn't quite match her speed. We all went to the door to see who it was. I picked up Ginger to keep her from darting out, and my 7-year-old sister grabbed Lady to calm her down. Without thinking or asking my mom, I swung the door wide open, a major lapse in judgment for me, which surprises me when I think about it now. We didn't live in a bad neighborhood, but we were still taught about stranger danger. A man stood on our doorstep. A white truck with a decal on the side was parked on the street. He was maybe in his late 20s or early 30s, not particularly tall, with scraggly facial hair. He flashed a smile at my mom, my sisters, and me and launched into his sales pitch. "Hello, ma'am and kiddos. I'm a mobile meat salesman. I sell beef, chicken, lamb, and pork. I bet you folks spend a lot of time at the supermarket hunting for the right kind of meat to make dinner." My sisters and I stood quietly, the younger ones behind my mom, while I stayed close to her side, holding Ginger. Lady kept up a low growl, baring her teeth at the man. My mom looked at him and said simply, "Sorry, my husband brings home the bacon," and moved to close the door. The guy wasn't having it. He pushed the door just enough to snatch Ginger right out of my arms. He stepped back off the doorstep and said, "What a nice puppy. I think I'm going to keep her." I panicked, hyperventilating on the spot. My mom lunged outside, ripped Ginger from his arms, slammed the door shut, and locked it. I was hysterical, and my sisters were crying. She basically told a guy to get lost and ushered us to the bedroom, putting the dogs in there with us and shutting the door. I remember the guy yelling rude things at my mom as he got into his truck and sped off. She spent a long time at the front window, keeping an eye on the house. She called my dad and told him what happened, which made him rush home early. After that, she called a friend who lived a street over, warning her not to open her door to anyone. I got a serious talking to for opening the door without checking, and let me tell you, I never did that again. Even now, I won't open the door unless I'm certain who's on the other side. This happened last semester when I was finishing 10th grade. I'm a teenage girl with almost no enemies, which makes this story even stranger. I'm still a bit nervous to share it because of the person involved, but I'm hoping for my own safety it doesn't get back to them. It all started in my science class on the very first day when my teacher assigned the seating plan. He was one of those teachers who didn't want you sitting with friends, believing it was a good way to meet new people. Trust me, though some people you just don't want to meet. I was seated next to a boy I'd never seen before named Al. Right away, I got a weird vibe from him, so I focused on my worksheet to avoid talking. I know that might sound rude, but it was a quiet class, and not introducing yourself wasn't unusual. I'll seem like the kind of person with zero social skills, awkward, unkempt, and even from a foot or two away, I could smell his bad breath. Apparently, I wasn't the only one avoiding conversation, because an awkward silence hung over the whole room. The teacher noticed and stood up in front of the class. I know it feels weird sitting next to a stranger, but it'll be better if you get to know each other. Turn to the person next to you, shake their hand, and tell them your name. Great, now I had to talk to this guy. We introduced ourselves and shook hands. His were sweaty, and the way he lingered during the handshake creeped me out. Most people stopped talking after that and went back to work, which is what I hoped for. But of course, that's not what happened. For about a minute, things were quiet, but I could feel him staring at me the whole time. I finally glanced over because it was getting weird, and I wanted him to stop. Before I could say anything, he spoke. "What kind of music do you like?" he asked awkwardly. I told him what I listened to, and not wanting to seem rude, asked him the same. In the most monotone, serious voice, he said, "I damn love Nicki Minaj. I love everything about her. She's the most beautiful woman ever." At first, I chuckled, thinking he was joking, but then I realized he was dead serious. I was surprised. He didn't seem like the type to like her music. Later, he admitted he didn't even care much for her songs. He just liked her body. That wasn't the creepy part, but it sets the stage for what came later, so I'm including it. He started talking about his other classes, going on and on about his Spanish class. I asked why he liked it so much, and he stared right into my eyes. "Miss Johnson is the hottest teacher I've ever seen. I love her so damn much." I didn't know how to respond, so I just said, "Oh cool, I heard she's nice." In the creepiest tone, he replied, "Yeah, and she's thick." I like him thick. That was weird, but it didn't seem like someone you'd want to cross, so I said, "Yeah, there are some good teachers here." I didn't think there was anything wrong with that, but his reaction shocked me. He exploded. "Hell no, I damn hate Mr. Jones. He's a piece of crap," he snapped angrily. I had no idea my comment would set him off. Mr. Jones was one of the most well-liked teachers in our school. Nobody disliked him. Apparently, he taught AL's English class last semester, and things didn't go well. I didn't ask why he hated him, and figured it was safer to play along before he caused a scene. "Yeah, he's my drama teacher, and he doesn't seem that great." I lied even though I knew Mr. Jones was awesome. Al talked to me almost the entire class. I barely responded, giving one-word answers to most of his questions, but he wouldn't stop. It was annoying, but he was intimidating, so I didn't do anything about it. I just wanted him to shut up so I could work. As the days went on, I realized how strange he was. He treated me like his therapist, spilling all his problems, but he didn't say a word to anyone else in class. I think he knew I was the only one who wouldn't call him out for being creepy because I was scared of him, and I had to sit next to him all year. I dreaded science class every day because I hated listening to him. I never got any work done. He'd tell me the most personal, disgusting things, like how he had a foot fungus and even showed me pictures on his phone. I was grossed out but didn't want to upset him, so I went along with it. A few days later, he brought up Mr. Jones again, angrier than I'd ever heard anyone. I planned on killing him, right? I was dead set on it. The only thing stopping me was the law, but maybe one day I'll find a way around it. He said it with a terrifying blank stare, in the most serious tone possible. I was rattled, but just said, "Well, you don't want to risk going to jail." I really wanted to tell a teacher or counselor because something was seriously off with him, and I didn't doubt he meant it. But if he got in trouble for those threats, he'd know it was me who snitched. If I made him mad, I knew he'd come for me. It'd be easier for him to hurt me than a teacher. I told my friends, and one who knew him said he was a total nutcase and that if he made another threat like that, I should probably tell someone. She agreed he wasn't joking. For the rest of the semester, he kept asking creepy questions and muttering curses under his breath. Once he asked what my stripper name would be if I were a stripper, completely out of nowhere since we'd never talked about anything like that. I was genuinely scared of him and tried to stay on his good side because I was terrified of what he'd do if I wasn't. He was violent, obsessed with revenge, and had a short fuse. One day, we were lab partners, and for the activity, we needed a gas source. I turned it on, and he started swearing and yelling, calling me stupid for wasting gas. I knew I wasn't, but I apologized and asked if he wanted to handle it instead to avoid trouble with the teacher. Another time, we were learning about the carbon cycle and how cows contribute to it. The teacher made a joke. Whenever I drive past a farm, I plug my nose so I don't smell the cow poop. Out of nowhere, Al blurted to the whole class. I inhaled deeply and say, Everyone laughed except me and him. I didn't laugh because I knew he was probably serious, and he didn't because he definitely was. For the next hour, he told me about his poop fetish. Yes, you read that right. He said nothing smelled better than poop, that he'd eaten horse poop once, and that he sometimes didn't use toilet paper because he liked playing with his own. He even said he'd touch other people's stuff afterward because it excited him knowing they'd come into contact with it. It was so hard to keep a straight face while he rambled about this disgusting stuff. I got fed up and sarcastically said, "Cool," at the end of one of his stories. That was a mistake. He got furious and started yelling at me. Classmates were staring, wondering what I'd done. It was humiliating, so I tried to calm him down before he made a bigger scene. I lied, saying I wasn't being sarcastic and actually thought it was cool. It took 3 minutes of apologizing to get him to relax. Sadly, I had to keep listening to his creepy remarks, but it got even worse. One day, he came to class looking pissed off. After the teacher's lesson, he started ranting like a maniac. "I hate everybody in this stupid school. I wish I could just come in here with a gun and shoot everyone, then myself. I don't even care anymore." He said it with piercing eyes locked on me. I was terrified. Nobody sane says that to someone they barely know. I desperately wanted to tell someone, but I had no proof, and I didn't want him to know I'd reported him. I tried to talk him out of it, saying hurting anyone would be a horrible idea, but that just made him mad at me. I worried that if one more teacher upset him, he'd actually do it. He fit the profile of a school shooter. Socially awkward, a loner, no compassion, poor judgment, and no concern for consequences. Every day, I was scared he'd pull a gun from his creepy, oversized bag. Thankfully, it's summer now, and I'm out of school for a while, so I won't see him until September. He harassed and scared people in other ways, too. Too many incidents to list. For example, that Spanish teacher he was obsessed with was clearly annoyed by his behavior. I wasn't there, but he told me he planned to take another class she taught just to be around her. My guess is he made inappropriate comments, and she found out about his plan because my friends saw him with a teacher in the counselor's office. Al later said he couldn't take the class anymore, likely because the teacher blocked it due to his creepiness. Another time, he called over a male peer tutor, a year older than us, for help with a question. When the tutor couldn't explain it clearly, I got mad and threatened to beat him up if he came near again. A few days later, he called the tutor over again, and instead of apologizing, he said in his creepy monotone, "Want to get milked?" The tutor was freaked out and left. Al turned to me and said, "I like messing with him." One day, I'm gonna milk his ass like a cow. He's seriously the creepiest person I've ever met. Edit. I've been thinking about how dangerous it could be if nobody reports what he says. I'm gonna figure out a way to inform the teachers without putting myself at risk when school starts. I have a family member in law enforcement, so I'll talk to them about whether the police can do anything. If not, I need to see my counselor on the first day anyway, so I'll bring it up then. A few years ago, my partner and I made a big move from the East Coast to the Pacific Northwest. We didn't know a soul in the city, but we'd saved up a decent chunk of money and hopped on a plane, excited for a fresh start. We haven't regretted it, but finding a place to live was a nightmare. The plan was to crash in hostels and cheap hotels until we could find jobs and an apartment. Getting work was surprisingly easy. We both landed jobs within a week of arriving. But finding a place to live? That was a whole different story. Every apartment we looked at had steep requirements for credit scores and minimum income. We started with legit sites, but after 2 months of bouncing between hostels, motels, and Airbnbs, we got desperate and turned to Craigslist. Most Craigslist listings gave us just as much trouble, but one day while scouring the site, I stumbled across an ad that seemed off. The poster said he had a large house in a nice neighborhood and was renting out a 500 square foot room for $600 a month, utilities included. In that city, that was suspiciously cheap. The ad was also written in a rambling way, half about the room, half an open letter defending himself against people who'd recently called him creepy. If we weren't so desperate, we wouldn't have touched it, but we were worried about running out of money. So we called him. On the phone, he sounded relatively normal. He suggested meeting in a public place to talk about the room, which we agreed to. We picked a restaurant near the hostel we were staying at, though we didn't tell him which one. When he showed up, he seemed surprised we were actually there. He sat down and talked a lot. I say he talked because it was mostly him rambling nonstop about himself and how he felt persecuted by everyone in the city. He claimed to be an artist and collector, repeatedly complaining that locals didn't understand his passions. He mentioned that the room he'd advertised was currently filled with his collection, but didn't say what it was. If things worked out, he'd hire people to move it to storage before we could move in. At one point, he abruptly stopped and rushed to the restroom. We used the moment to talk it over. We knew he was probably unhinged, but the threat of homelessness loomed, so we decided to at least see the place before judging him solely on his eccentricities. He came back to the table, sweaty and flustered. We later figured out why, but at the time, we were clueless. Before we could say anything, he blurted, "I want to show you the apartment right now." We were caught off guard but had just discussed it, so we agreed. I asked him to text me the address so we could take public transit, but he insisted on driving us since we didn't have a car. We hesitated. Getting into his truck seemed risky, and he could probably tell. But desperation won out, and we figured he wasn't likely to hurt us. So we crammed into the front seat of his tiny, rusty, ancient pickup truck. My partner was pressed against the door, and I was uncomfortably close to him as he babbled on about how the city had gone downhill and how his old friends shunned him. One of the truck's windows was broken, letting wind whip through, adding to the charm. At one point, he commented on how romantic we were together and how he envied our youth. We arrived at his house, and he'd been honest about a few things. The neighborhood was decent, and his home was a large one-story ranch house. I noted out loud that he had bars on all the windows and multiple locks on the front door. He said his collection was valuable, and he was protecting it from thieves. Once inside, I made sure he went ahead so he couldn't lock the door behind us. 3 things hit us immediately: his art, his collection, and the smell. His art, which he was proud of, involved taking innocent, childlike objects, baby dolls, stuffed animals, ceramic figurines, kids' toys, and attaching dildos to them. One standout piece, which he called his unicorn, was a ceramic horse with its head sawed off, replaced to the baby doll's head, and a hand-sculpted clay penis as the horn. His collection was mostly rubber, plastic, and latex clothing and gas masks, scattered everywhere. The house was so packed with junk that every room had a narrow, single-file path to navigate without bumping into art or stepping on piles of fetish gear. The place reeked of mildew and moldy rubber. The carpet looked like it hadn't seen a vacuum since the 70s. As we passed through the kitchen, he declared his love for cast iron pans because you don't have to wash them, while we noticed countertops cluttered with rusted pans caked with decades of scorched food. We stayed behind him, mostly silent, as he stopped to point out favorite art pieces and repeat that he was leading us to the room full of his favorite stuff, which he'd have moved out for us. He acted like us moving in was a done deal. He opened the room's door with a dramatic voila. The room was probably 500 square feet, but every inch was stuffed with clothing racks packed with shiny rubber, latex, and plastic pants, all with dildos sewn onto the front. Up to this point, we tried not to react to the freaky stuff, worried he'd snap if we did. But I noticed he seemed disappointed by our lack of reaction. I think he got off on shocking people, and this wasn't going as planned. We told him the room looked big enough and that we'd like to go back to our hotel to think it over. He didn't react much, but agreed to drive us back. As we walked out, when he thought I wasn't looking, he tossed something from his pocket into a dark room we passed. I worried it might be his keys, so I used my phone's light to peek inside. The room was filled with a pile of tied-off, used condoms. We later guessed he'd been masturbating at the restaurant and added to the pile before driving us back. We piled into his truck for a long, awkward ride back. His rambling was more frustrated now, and he drove past our drop-off point 3 times before we finally jumped out at a red light, shouting, "This is good here. Nice to meet you, thanks, bye." I saved his number as Mr. Creepy Pants. Over the next few days, he texted, asking if we'd decided yet. Trying to be polite, I said we passed but thanked him for the offer. He responded by spamming, "Are you creep yet?" about 30 times. I don't know why I kept being polite, but when he stopped, I replied, "No, we thought your collection was lovely, but it's so large we can't ask you to move it." He took a few days to respond, but handled it better than I expected. "Yeah, I didn't want to move it anyway. Thanks for understanding." He even recommended a local burger place for some reason. I blocked his number soon after, just to be safe. About 8 years ago, my boyfriend and I rented a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment on the 2nd floor of a low-rent complex. The economy was rough, and with job troubles, we took what we could afford. Our unit was up a flight of stairs that ran parallel to the building, hit a small landing, turned 90 degrees to the right, and continued to the 2nd floor. At the top, facing the building, our door was on the right, with space for a couple chairs, the stairs in the middle, and the door to a 1-bedroom unit on the left. The 1-bedroom was on the corner of the building. Our building faced an identical one across a path, with 2 more buildings to the side, one next to us and one across from it. A large grassy area separated our building from another set of 4 identical apartment buildings, with a path running down the middle where all the stairs and first-floor entrances connected. Over the 2 years we lived there, we saw all sorts of things. A group of Hispanic couples lived in the 1-bedroom next to us for a while, at least 6 people, sometimes more. I always felt bad imagining how cramped it must have been. They were quiet, kept to themselves, and didn't cause trouble. We saw 3 different tenants in that unit over time. The last was a single guy named Carmine, who I became friends with, which is how I got to see inside his place. While living there, I once heard what sounded like a life-or-death fight in the apartment below the 1-bedroom next to us. It was so loud, violent, and terrifying, with so much screaming, that I reluctantly called the police. When they arrived, they found blood on the apartment floor and a trail leading away along the path between the buildings. The police broke down the door and discovered a gay couple had gotten into a fight. One guy stabbed the other in the stomach, and the blood trail came from the stabber who'd badly cut his hand and left a mess as he fled. My boyfriend and I ended up in court over this because the police came to our unit and begged me to give an official statement, saying they needed it to justify breaking down the door. Other incidents happened too. More domestic abuse, a huge brawl at the pool involving at least 20 people, and a couple of break-ins. One day in the middle of summer, I was outside our front door smoking a cigarette. I don't smoke inside because it's gross. It stinks up everything, and I didn't want my pets exposed to it. We kept a big Rubbermaid container outside for recyclables until we could take them to the recycling plant, along with a blue fold-up camping chair and a small table with an ashtray. I was standing by the chair, looking over the balcony at a cat in the window of a unit across from me. when I saw a guy walking along the path between the buildings. I sat down to hide myself and reached the ashtray to put out my cigarette when I heard, "Hey, miss." I didn't respond, put out my cigarette, and stood to go inside. "Hey, girl, what's up?" "Excuse me," he said, sounding much closer. I turned to see he'd come up to the landing on the stairs, staring at me. He must have moved quietly because he was a big guy, at least 230 pounds, over 6 feet tall, and I hadn't heard the stairs creak like they usually did. He'd covered the distance fast while my back was turned for just a second or two. I've taken Taekwondo and self-defense classes, but I have bad knees from multiple surgeries. At barely 5 feet tall and 110 pounds, I'm not built for a physical confrontation, especially with someone that large. "Can I bum a cigarette?" he asked with a threatening look. His mouth smiled, but it was forced, not reaching his cold, calculating eyes. They flicked down to what he could see of me above the short patio wall and back up. He didn't try to be friendly, offer to pay, or explain why he was asking, like most people do when bumming a smoke. Usually, people look a bit embarrassed or hopeful. He was just glaring, faking a smile. My heart raced as I assessed the situation. Why had this huge guy crept up the stairs in the split second I wasn't looking, just to ask for a cigarette? Why not ask from the path to save the effort if I said no? Why the cold eyes and fake smile? In my head, I thought, damn, Carmine's at work, and so is Jason, my boyfriend. I'm on my own. I kept my fear off my face and said, "Sorry, I don't have any more." I just smoked my last one, which was true, as I backed toward my door. He sneered. "Are you sure?" I answered clearly, "Yes, I'm sure." "Sorry." As I spoke, I felt the doorknob. None too soon, because his fake smile vanished as he lunged up the remaining stairs. The Rubbermaid container was by the door, but I knew the layout by heart from lugging groceries up. I yanked the door open, spun inside, and shoved it shut as I turned to lock it. He wasn't expecting the container and stumbled into it, but managed to grab the door with his left hand before it closed. I was already pushing with all my weight, so his hand wasn't enough to stop it. It slammed on his fingers, and he hollered, yanking his hand back. Instinctively, I shoved the door shut as he reached for the knob with his other hand. With no time to spare, I twisted the deadbolt. He started yanking the knob, rattling the door in its frame, twisting it back and forth. There was a large window next to the door, right above the Rubbermaid box, which had slid partially away when he fell. Between pounding on the door, he screamed, "Let me in, you bitch. You broke my fingers, you stupid whore. I'm gonna kill you when I get my hands on you. Open this damn door," among other awful things. He'd walk to the window, cup his hands around his face to peer in. I don't know why he didn't break it, but thank God he didn't. I ran and yanked my blackout curtains closed, which made him pound and yell louder. Thankfully, I had my cell phone in my pocket from being outside. It took a frantic minute to find it while he kept kicking the door and screaming. I knew no one else would likely call the police. In a rough neighborhood, people avoid getting involved, and it was a weekday, so most weren't home. The elderly couple below had a nearly deaf husband, and his wife was at work. I called 911, and it didn't take much explaining. The operator could hear him over the phone. The police were on their way fast. While waiting, I locked myself and my cats in the bathroom, barricaded the door, and grabbed my thick wooden bat. I stayed on the phone. At some point, he must have given up or heard sirens and bolted, because he was gone before the police arrived. I gave a detailed description, and they searched the area but never found him, as far as I know. I called Jason, who was stuck at work on a double shift and couldn't leave, then my mom. I ended up taking the cats to my mom's for the night so they wouldn't be alone. It took hours for me to stop shaking, and I was paranoid the rest of the time we lived there. I never saw that guy again. About 8 years ago, my boyfriend and I rented a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment on the second floor of a low-rent complex. The economy was rough, and with job troubles, we took what we could afford. Our unit was up a flight of stairs that ran parallel to the building, hit a small landing, turned 90 degrees to the right, and continued to the second floor. At the top, facing the building, our door was on the right, with space for a couple chairs, the stairs in the middle, and the door to a one-bedroom unit on the left. The one bedroom was on the corner of the building. Our building faced an identical one across a path, with two more buildings to the side, one next to us and one across from it. A large grassy area separated our building from another set of four identical apartment buildings, with a path running down the middle where all the stairs and first-floor entrances connected. Over the 2 years we lived there, we saw all sorts of things. A group of Hispanic couples lived in the one bedroom next to us for a while, at least 6 people, sometimes more. I always felt bad imagining how cramped it must have been. They were quiet, kept to themselves, and didn't cause trouble. We saw 3 different tenants in that unit over time. The last was a single guy named Carmine, who I became friends with, which is how I got to see inside his place. While living there, I once heard what sounded like a life-or-death fight in the apartment below the one bedroom next to us. It was so loud, violent, and terrifying, with so much screaming, that I reluctantly called the police. When they arrived, they found blood on the apartment floor and a trail leading away along the path between the buildings. The police broke down the door and discovered a gay couple had gotten into a fight. One guy stabbed the other in the stomach, and the blood trail came from the stabber who'd badly cut his hand and left a mess as he fled. My boyfriend and I ended up in court over this because the police came to our unit and begged me to give an official statement, saying they needed it to justify breaking down the door. Other incidents happened too. More domestic abuse, a huge brawl at the pool involving at least 20 people, and a couple of break-ins. One day in the middle of summer, I was outside our front door smoking a cigarette. I don't smoke inside because it's gross. It stinks up everything, and I didn't want my pets exposed to it. We kept a big Rubbermaid container outside for recyclables until we could take them to the recycling plant, along with a blue fold-up camping chair and a small table with an ashtray. I was standing by the chair, looking over the balcony at a cat in the window of the unit across from me, when I saw a guy walking along the path between the buildings. I sat down to hide myself and reached the ashtray to put out my cigarette when I heard, Hey, miss." I didn't respond, put out my cigarette, and stood to go inside. "Hey, girl, what's up?" "Excuse me," he said, sounding much closer. I turned to see he'd come up to the landing on the stairs, staring at me. He must have moved quietly because he was a big guy, at least 230 pounds, over 6 feet tall, and I hadn't heard the stairs creak like they usually did. He'd covered the distance fast while my back was turned for just a second or two. I've taken Taekwondo and self-defense classes, but I have bad knees from multiple surgeries. At barely 5 feet tall and 110 pounds, I'm not built for a physical confrontation, especially with someone that large. "Can I bum a cigarette?" he asked with a threatening look. His mouth smiled, but it was forced, not reaching his cold, calculating eyes. They flicked down to what he could see of me above the short patio wall and back up. He didn't try to be friendly, offer to pay, or explain why he was asking, like most people do when bumming a smoke. Usually, people look a bit embarrassed or hopeful. He was just glaring, faking a smile. My heart raced as I assessed the situation. Why had this huge guy crept up the stairs in the split second I wasn't looking, just to ask for a cigarette? Why not ask from the path to save the effort if I said no? Why the cold eyes and fake smile? In my head, I thought, damn, Carmine's at work, and so is Jason, my boyfriend. I'm on my own. I kept my fear off my face and said, "Sorry, I don't have any more." I just smoked my last one, which was true, as I backed toward my door. He sneered. "Are you sure?" I answered clearly, "Yes, I'm sure." "Sorry." As I spoke, I felt the doorknob. None too soon, because his fake smile vanished as he lunged up the remaining stairs. The Rubbermaid container was by the door, but I knew the layout by heart from lugging groceries up. I yanked the door open, spun inside, and shoved it shut as I turned to lock it. He wasn't expecting the container and stumbled into it, but managed to grab the door with his left hand before it closed. I was already pushing with all my weight, so his hand wasn't enough to stop it. It slammed on his fingers, and he hollered, yanking his hand back. Instinctively, I shoved the door shut as he reached for the knob with his other hand. With no time to spare, I twisted the deadbolt. He started yanking the knob, rattling the door in its frame, twisting it back and forth. There was a large window next to the door, right above the Rubbermaid box, which had slid partially away when he fell. Between pounding on the door, he screamed, "Let me in, you bitch. You broke my fingers, you stupid whore. I'm gonna kill you when I get my hands on you. Open this damn door," among other awful things. He'd walk to the window, cup his hands around his face to peer in. I don't know why he didn't break it, but thank God he didn't. I ran and yanked my blackout curtains closed, which made him pound and yell louder. Thankfully, I had my cell phone in my pocket for being outside. It took a frantic minute to find it while he kept kicking the door and screaming. I knew no one else would likely call the police. In a rough neighborhood, people avoid getting involved, and it was a weekday, so most weren't home. The elderly couple below had a nearly deaf husband, and his wife was at work. I called 911, and it didn't take much explaining. The operator could hear him over the phone. The police were on their way fast. While waiting, I locked myself and my cats in the bathroom, barricaded the door, and grabbed my thick wooden bat. I stayed on the phone. At some point, he must have given up or heard sirens and bolted, because he was gone before the police arrived. I gave a detailed description, and they searched the area but never found him, as far as I know. I called Jason, who was stuck at work on a double shift and couldn't leave, then my mom. I ended up taking the cats to my mom's for the night so they wouldn't be alone. It took hours for me to stop shaking, and I was paranoid the rest of the time we lived there. I never saw that guy again. It's late October, that time of year when the air smells like frost and rotting leaves. My farm's been in the family for generations. 120 acres of corn, a couple barns, and a creaky old house that's seen better days. I live alone. No wife, no kids, just me and my mutt, Rusty. He's a good boy, half coonhound, half who knows, and he's usually chill unless a raccoon gets too cocky near the trash cans. I spend my days working the fields, fixing equipment, and drinking cheap beer while listening to classic rock on a radio that's older than I am. It's a simple life, and I'm good with it. Yesterday started like any other. Woke up at 5 a.m., made coffee that tastes like tar, headed out to check the combine. Harvest is in full swing, so I've been busting my ass to get the corn in before the weather turns. The day was normal. Worked till my back screamed. Ate a sandwich for lunch. Yelled at Rusty for chasing a squirrel into the field. By dusk, I was beat. The sun was setting, painting the sky this bruised purple color, and the corn stalks were whispering in the breeze. You know that sound, right? Like dry paper rustling. It's creepy if you think about it too long, but I'm used to it. I locked up the barn, grabbed a beer, and settled on the porch with Rusty. The house faces the main cornfield, and at night, it's just this wall of darkness out there. No streetlights, no neighbors, just the stars and the occasional hoot of an owl. I was halfway through my beer when Rusty's ears perked up. He let out this low growl, not his usual squirrel alert bullshit, but something deeper, like he was pissed. I shushed him, figuring it was a coyote or maybe a deer, but he kept staring at the field, hackles raised. That's when I noticed the air felt off. Heavy like before a storm, but the sky was clear. And it was quiet. Too quiet. No crickets, no wind, nothing. Just Rusty's growling and my own breathing. I grabbed my flashlight, a big mag light that doubles as a club, and shone it into the field. The beam cut through the dark, lighting up rows of corn stalks, but I didn't see anything. No eyes glinting back, no movement. Probably nothing, I told Rusty, but my gut was telling me different. I've lived out here my whole life. I know when something's not right. I locked the front door, which I don't usually bother with, and kept the flashlight close while I finished my beer inside. Rusty stayed by the window, growling on and off. I tried to laugh it off, told him he was being a drama queen, but I was spooked. Around 11 p.m., I decided to call it a night. I was brushing my teeth half asleep when I heard it, a snap like a twig breaking, right outside the house. Rusty lost his shit, barking like he was going to tear someone's throat out. I froze, toothpaste dripping down my chin, and listened. Another snap, closer this time, maybe 20 feet from the back door. My heart was pounding, but I'm not some city boy who shits himself at every noise. I grabbed the shotgun from the closet, a 12 gauge I keep for coyotes, and loaded it with buckshot. Rusty was going nuts, scratching at the door, so I told him to shut up and stay put. I flipped on the back porch light, expecting to see a raccoon or maybe a stray dog. Nothing. Just the edge of the cornfield, swaying slightly, and the old swing set my dad built 30 years ago, creaking in the breeze. But that heavy feeling was back, worse now, like the air was pressing down on me. And there was this smell, faint but wrong, like damp earth mixed with something sour, like spoiled meat. I called out, "Who's there?" "You're on private property." My voice sounded louder than I meant, echoing off the barn. No answer, but I swear I heard something move in the corn, a rustle too heavy for a small animal. I stepped off the porch, shotgun ready, flashlight in my other hand. The corn was about 10 feet away, and I swept the light across it, looking for movement. That's when I saw it, a single stalk, maybe 15 feet into the field, bent at a weird angle, like something had pushed through and snapped it. My stomach dropped. Deer don't do that, they're careful and nimble. This was clumsy, deliberate. I took a step closer, and the smell got stronger, thick enough to make my eyes water. Rusty was still barking inside, but it sounded muffled now, like the house was a mile away. I don't know why I kept going. Stupid, I know, but I was pissed. This is my land, my home. I pushed into corn, stalks brushing against my arms, the leaves sharp and cold. The flashlight beam bobbed, catching glimpses of dirt and roots. Every few steps, I'd stop and listen. Nothing but my own heartbeat and that damn rustling, always just out of sight. Then I found another broken stalk, then another, like a trail leading deeper into the field. My hands were sweating, slipping on the shotgun's grip, but I kept moving. About 50 feet in, the trail stopped. No more broken stalks, just a small clearing where the corn was flattened, like something heavy had been lying there. The ground was churned up, wet and sticky, and that smell, God, it was everywhere, like I was standing in a slaughterhouse. I shone the light around, and that's when I saw the marks. Not footprints, not exactly. They were smudges, long and uneven, like something had dragged itself through the dirt. They led toward the far edge of the field, where the woods start. My mouth went dry. I'm no tracker, but those weren't human. Too wide, too deep, and there were no clear toes or heels. Just shapes. I should have turned back. I know that now. But I was pissed, scared, and stubborn as hell. I followed the marks, corn scraping my face, my boots sinking into the mud. The woods were pitch black, and the flashlight barely dented the darkness. I kept calling out, "I'm armed, asshole. Show yourself." No response, but the rustling was louder now, faster, like whatever it was didn't care if I heard it. My beam caught something, a flash of movement, low to the ground, maybe 30 feet ahead. I froze, aiming the shotgun, but it was gone before I could make it out. Too big for a coyote, too fast for a bear. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the flashlight. Then I heard it. Not a rustle, not a snap, but a sound. Like a wheeze, wet and guttural, coming from the woods. It wasn't human, wasn't animal. It was wrong, like something trying to breathe through a throat full of mud. I backed up, tripping over a root, and the wheeze turned into a low, rattling growl. I fired the shotgun into the air, just to scare it, the blast deafening in the quiet. The growling stopped, but now the silence was worse. I could feel eyes on me, even though I couldn't see shit. The smell was choking me, and my skin was crawling, like I was standing in something's territory, and it knew I didn't belong. I ran. Didn't even think, just bolted back through the corn, stalks whipping my face, my breath ragged. I didn't stop till I was back in the house, slamming the door and locking it. Rusty was still barking, but he was cowering under the table now, tail tucked. I checked every window, every door, shotgun still in my hands. Nothing moved outside, but I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind had me jumping. That smell lingered on my clothes, in my nose, like it had soaked into me. When the sun came up, I went out to check the field. I don't know what I expected. Maybe nothing. Maybe hoping it was all a bad dream. But the trail was still there, a flattened clearing, the smudges in the dirt. And worse, half my cornfield was trashed. Stalks snapped, roots torn up, like something had gone on a rampage after I ran. Not eaten, not harvested, just destroyed. Thousands of dollars worth of crop gone. I followed the smudges to the woods, but they vanished at the tree line, like whatever made them just stopped existing. I called the sheriff, but he was useless. Said it was probably kids or a drunk neighbor, but I could tell he didn't believe it. He didn't see the marks, didn't smell that stench. I've checked the field twice today, and I keep finding new damage. Little patches of corn flattened, always closer to the house. Rusty won't go outside anymore, and I don't blame him. I'm sitting here now writing this, and it's almost midnight. The porch light's on, but it doesn't reach the field. I can hear the corn rustling, even though there's no wind. And every once in a while, I catch that smell again, faint but there, like it's waiting. My boyfriend of 5 years and I recently moved from Iowa, where both our families live, to a new subdivision just outside a small town in Texas. We bought our first house together, a place at the end of a cul-de-sac with a huge field full of trees stretching out behind it. We were thrilled to start our new life, and our 2 dogs, basically our kids, made it feel complete. One night, my boyfriend decided to head out with some new co-workers to the city, about 35 minutes away. I'm more of an introvert, and big crowds aren't my thing, so I opted to stay home. I love nights alone because I can binge snacks and watch horror movies he'd never sit through. I got home from work and the grocery store around 6 p.m., barricaded myself and the dogs in the bedroom, and kicked off my scary movie marathon of awesomeness. Side note, the dogs get weird when my boyfriend isn't home at night. They'll bark randomly at nothing, which freaks me out a bit, but I've gotten used to it. Our bedroom has one window right next to the bed. I usually keep it open for fresh air, but that night, I only cracked it a little. I'm deep into some cheesy 80s horror flick when the dogs start barking. I pause, take notice, because you never know, flip on the light, and look around. Nothing. Lights off, back to the dits running up the stairs. It's about 11 p.m. now, and I figure my boyfriend's still got a couple hours out. No big deal. But then the dogs start barking again, and this time they don't stop. I slowly glance toward the window. At first, I don't see anything. Then, at the bottom of the window, peering up at me, are a pair of eyes. Just eyes, no face, no nose. The window's low to the ground, so whoever this is, they're crouching. My first thought is that it's my boyfriend messing with me. We sometimes scare each other for laughs, but not like this. I try to play it cool. Calvin, you're dumb. Seriously, it's not funny. The eyes keep staring. Okay, you're really milking this now, fool. Hardy har, stop it. You're freaking the dogs out. Then the eyes start moving, slowly, still pressed to the window. I can't see the face, just one eye now, sliding up as the figure stands. When they're fully upright, it's clear this person is way too big to be my 5 feet 11 inches boyfriend. I freeze. I've always thought of myself as tough, ready for sketchy situations thanks to all those horror movies. But now, I'm paralyzed. The dogs are still barking, and this guy just stares. I fumble for my phone, finally finding my voice. Get out of here, you psycho. I'm calling the cops. That's when I hear it, a tap on the window. It's a large knife, tapping against the glass. He must have seen the terror on my face because a slow, sadistic smile creeps across his. I dial the police, stammering, barely getting the words out. He takes a single sidestep, now fully in view, just standing there as I talk to the dispatcher. Knowing the cops are coming, he takes one deliberate step backward, still smiling that bone-chilling smile. Each step is slow, calculated, his eyes locked on me. He reaches the fence, climbs over, still staring. I see him peek over the fence one last time before he vanishes into the night. The police never found him. This happened a year ago when I was living with my then boyfriend, now fiancé, in a townhouse in the suburbs. It was a pretty safe area, though there had been some robberies a couple of blocks away. They weren't common, and I felt comfortable walking home alone at night. One weekend, my boyfriend's brother, Marshall, his girlfriend, Amy, and her brother, Curtis, came to visit. The plan was to chill, have a few drinks, play video games, and relax. My boyfriend had just finished his LSATs after months of intense studying, so he was ready to unwind before the exam. Unfortunately, I came down with the worst flu I've ever had, sky-high fever, 1 degree shy of needing a hospital, nausea, headaches, body aches, the works. I didn't want to ruin everyone's fun, so they came over anyway, and I stayed in my room. They went out to eat before coming back, so I was alone in bed, watching TV, feeling like death. I slept on and off. Around 4 p.m., I heard the front door open and assumed they were back. I called out for my boyfriend, but no one responded. I figured he'd check on me soon, so I brushed it off as maybe a neighbor's noise or something falling. I went back to sleep. At some point, in a deep, medicated haze, I groggily opened my eyes and thought I saw a figure move across the room. I was so sick and drugged up that it didn't fully register. It was dark, and part of me chalked it up to the TV. I drifted off again. Around 7 p.m., everyone came back loud and lively. Amy was tipsy and in high spirits, so there was a lot of laughter. My boyfriend came in with some soup and sat with me, chatting about his day while I ate. I asked him to grab a new bottle of aspirin from the basket under the bed. We had a full-size bed with one small basket underneath where I kept extra pill bottles, toothbrushes, shaving cream, and random stuff. He reached down, handed me the aspirin, but his face had gone pale, like he'd seen a ghost. I didn't think much of it at the time and said, "Thanks." Then he stammered, "Come on, I'm taking you to the bathroom." He never stutters. I was out of it but caught the odd tone. I told him I didn't need to pee and didn't feel like getting up. He insisted, "No, let's go." I don't want to climb back upstairs just because you need to pee in 10 minutes. His words stung, but I figured he was right since I just had soup and half a bottle of water. He walked me downstairs, which confused me because we had a bathroom upstairs. I was too exhausted to question it. He sat me on the couch and I whispered, "What's going on?" His hand was shaking as he pulled out his phone. Then he leaned in and whispered, "There's someone under your bed." Amy laughed, so I laughed too, thinking it was a prank, but the vibe felt deadly serious. Marshall suggested we get out of the house, so we did. As we were leaving, we heard a thud upstairs. We hurried out, drove away, and called the police. They searched the house but found no one. The intruder must have realized we were onto him and slipped out. My boyfriend couldn't describe much, just that he saw sneakers in the dark under the bed. The scariest part, the police found a small, rusty steak knife under the bed. There hadn't been any murders in the area, so my friends figured he was just looking for a place to crash. I'm not sure how he got in, but I have theories. I'm so proud of how my boyfriend handled it. He's usually calm and collected, and I always thought he'd crack in a crisis, but he didn't. I just hope I never cross paths with that creep again. This started about a month ago on weekends. To set the scene, I live in a large 2-story house that's been split into 3 separate apartments, 2 on the first floor and 1 upstairs. My best friend lives in the apartment next door, and the upstairs unit was recently vacated. I've been here for 6 years with my roommate, our 3 cats, and my dog. We'd never had any issues until recently, when our dog began barking at seemingly nothing in the middle of the night. He'd stare intently out the window, then race to the front door, barking the whole way. We figured he was just spotting a cat or a rabbit and told him to hush. One night, my neighbor knocked on our door, saying he thought he'd seen someone on his porch. He grabbed a cane and tried to chase them, but they jumped the porch railing and ran off. After that, we started checking every time the dog barked at nothing during the night. My neighbor saw a figure dart away at least twice when we looked. We called the cops, but they said there wasn't much they could do. They asked if we had any suspects, maybe someone messing with us. There were some neighbors we'd had to report to the landlord for being loud at 3 a.m. on drunken Friday nights, but nothing serious enough to point fingers. We went back to our normal routines. My roommate works 3rd shift, while my neighbor and I work 2nd shift, though he just switched from 3rds. Nothing ever happened when I was home alone, so I thought it might be over. Recently, though, I got a girlfriend, and because of our schedules, I often spend midweek nights at her place since those are my days off. That means the apartment is empty at night except for my dog, and my roommate only has weekends off. Last week, I was at my girlfriend's place. We'd had a bit of an argument, so I was lying in bed, mulling things over, unable to sleep. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from my roommate, asking me to call her. I figured she was on break at work, bored, or wanting to chat about Overwatch since it had just come out and I hadn't played it yet, being away from home. I called her, and she said she was at home and thought someone had been in the apartment. I asked why she thought that, and she explained. Our neighbor had gotten home late from work, around 1:30 a.m. He was watching YouTube videos, laughing loudly, thinking he was the only one in the building. He heard footsteps and initially thought it was me, but then remembered I was at my girlfriend's. He wondered why my dog didn't bark, then realized I'd taken him with me because my girlfriend's kids wanted to meet him. He called my roommate to ask if she'd called off work. While they were talking, he heard a scratchy meow outside his window. He went out and found our eldest cat meowing to be let back in. Our cats never go outside, though they've escaped before. He scooped her up, went to our apartment. Our connecting door is usually unlocked since he comes over often, and put her inside. He told my roommate, who then told her boss, who sent her home. When she got there, she found our front door unlocked, which she never leaves that way. The door to the sunroom, where the cat's litter boxes are, was shut. We never close it so the cats can access them. She checked around and found boxes moved out of the hall closet, with my card game and board game boxes scattered, not how we left them. Then she heard a meow and found one of our cats shut in the bedroom. She always checks to make sure no cats are in there before leaving, since one will pee on the bed if trapped. Our bass guitar was also knocked off its stand onto the floor. None of the cats are heavy enough to do that, especially not the kitten who was shut in there. Freaked out, she checked the windows. The one in the sunroom was open for the cats to sit in, but the screen was intact. Outside, she found a trash can dragged up against the house under that window, like someone had stood on it to peek in. Our best guess is that whoever this was had been sneaking around again. When they didn't hear the dog, they broke in and were rummaging through our stuff when they heard my neighbor laughing, panicked, and bolted. I'm not taking this lightly. I'm often home alone at night, so I'm planning to get a gun for protection. Before I get into the story, let me set a few things straight. I had a friend who was a twin, and they had a younger sister, but she's not relevant here. Soon after the twins were born, their mom suffered a stillbirth, which took a heavy toll on her. My friend said when he was little, he'd wake up to find her in the nursery, talking to an empty crib, holding full conversations at weird hours of the night. Apparently, this kind of behavior was somewhat normal, given her grief. It really shook her, and later she started telling people she was a medium, claiming she had a sixth sense for afterlife phenomena. As the twins got older, she calmed down a bit, but she still believed she had a special gift. Now for the creepy experience that happened at their house during a boys' night. It was the twins' birthday, and my friend convinced his mom to let a small group of us come over. His mom made plans to go out with her new partner that night, which was perfect because we always got into mischief without supervision. After she left, we messed around for about an hour but started running out of things to do. I don't know why, but I suggested we try a Ouija board. I'd seen them in movies and thought it'd be hilarious to give it a shot. All the guys were on board, so I got to work setting up. Outside, I cut out letters, a yes and a no, arranged them in a circle on a plastic table, and placed one of his mom's shot glasses in the middle. I explained the rules, and we were all pumped to try it. The other twin wasn't into it. He was tired, said he was going to shower and call it an early night, and didn't like the idea of messing with this stuff. We went ahead anyway. We decided to set up a tripod camera to record the table, just in case something supernatural happened. We turned it on, started recording, and sat around the table. We placed our fingers on the shot glass and began firing off questions. At first, they were dumb, immature ones like, "Are you gay?" Or "Can we talk to Elvis?" Nothing happened, but we were laughing and goofing around. Then the glass moved, but it was obvious someone was pushing it. You could tell by the way it jerked. It was annoying because I really wanted it to work, and no one was taking it seriously. We were about to give up since people were being idiots and not giving it a fair chance. Then things got weird. The air turned cold, and the breeze died down. I felt a chill that made my eyes water, like I was hypersensitive. I'm pretty sure the other guys felt it too. That's when it happened. The glass started moving on its own. It felt completely different, not like someone was pushing it. It was like it was dragging our fingers along the table, slow and eerie. We all looked at each other, eyes darting from face to face, trying to figure out who was messing around. Every single guy looked terrified and confused. The glass moved from letter to letter, not spelling anything, just gibberish. I hated the feeling but was too curious to stop. I started asking serious questions. Who are you? Nothing. The glass kept moving aimlessly, then it had stopped like it disconnected, only to start again, weak at first, then stronger. Are you a person? I asked. The glass slid to the center, then back to no. That's when I knew this was a bad idea. The glass picked up speed, moving in circles, ignoring the letters. It felt aggressive, like it was being pressed hard into the table. We were horrified. A few guys yanked their fingers off the shot glass in shock, but the rest of us kept going, driven by curiosity. Are you dead? Someone else asked. The glass slowly slid to yes. Then, out of nowhere, all the lights and power in the house shut off. We were plunged into pitch-black darkness, the silence deafening. Panic set in. We jumped up, breaking away from the table, freaking out. Then the power surged back on, and the TV blared to life. The other twin ran outside, still wet from his shower, wrapped in just a towel, yelling, "Who turned off the bathroom lights while I was in there?" We explained what happened with the Ouija board, but he didn't believe us. Then I remembered the camera. "We recorded it," I said. We rushed to the tripod, grabbed the camera, and tried to show him the evidence. But the camera was off. We were stunned because it had a full battery when we started, and we were sure we'd pressed record. We turned it back on, and sure enough, the battery was nearly full like I thought. We hit play, but I'd set it up at a bad angle. You couldn't see the table, just the backs of our heads. We watched until the part just before the power cut out, and then the footage stopped. Somehow the camera turned off at the exact moment the house lost power. The weirdest part, the camera ran on a battery, completely unrelated to the house's electricity. The mood was ruined. No one was excited or joking anymore. We were just quiet, trying to process what had happened. Even the twin who was in the shower was creeped out and confused. We asked if he'd messed with the power inside, but he swore he hadn't, and I believe him to this day. I never touched a Ouija board again after that chilling experience. What started as a joke turned weird fast. This happened years ago, but it's still vivid, like it was yesterday. My eyes are watering just typing this. Now that I'm older, I'm thinking about trying it again this weekend with a good friend. I'm hoping for a similar reaction, but I feel like I'm more mature now and can handle it better. I don't know what to think, but that's my story. Thanks for listening. I've always been a petite girl, standing at just 4 feet 11 inches as a full-grown 27-year-old, and I can easily pass for much younger, especially without makeup. When I was about 7 or 8, my dad bought a small cabin in Livingston, Texas, in an area called Alaska. I'm specifying this because it's important for the second part of the story, and anyone with kids needs to be aware of that place. The cabin was nothing fancy, just 600 square feet, a single big room, a tiny kitchen the size of a normal bathroom, a bathroom the size of a large closet, and a front porch. The property spanned 2 lots, so there was plenty of outdoor space, but the cabin itself was cozy and basic. The area was an odd mix of backwoods and suburbia, a true neighborhood, but not the neat, polished kind I was used to in suburban Houston. Still, it became a cherished place for me, filled with some of my best memories, including my evacuation for Houston during Hurricane Rita, but that's a story for another time. When I was around 11 or 12, my dad got me a 4-wheeler, and suddenly the little lake town felt a lot bigger. I didn't venture too far, but I went much farther than before. It was common to see me zipping around the neighborhood roads with a pile of local kids piled on the back of the 4-wheeler during our weekend visits. This was around 2001 or 2002, when cell phones existed but weren't universal. I usually carried a beeper, but since there was no phone at the lake house, my dad gave me a walkie-talkie with a long range. Looking back, in today's world of constant connectivity, this seems risky, but it was a small town, and we spent so much time there that it felt safe. One weekend, I was cruising around the neighborhood as usual and stopped at a peninsula overlooking the lake, a set of docks where us kids love to swim, ignoring the very real threat of giant alligators. Being dumb kids, we didn't worry about that. I was sitting there, taking in the view, when my walkie-talkie crackled to life. Assuming it was my parents, I answered quickly. At first, I couldn't make out what they said, so I tried confirming it was my dad. The spot was a bit far from the cabin, but I'd reached my parents from there before, so even though the voice was unclear, I figured it was him. Nothing seemed off at first. I don't recall the exact conversation, but it was weird enough to annoy me slightly. Garbled questions I answered without giving away who I was or where I was. The talk started to feel strange, but I wasn't alarmed yet. My dad was notorious for pranks and goofing around, so I kept chatting, not thinking much of it. Then the guy on the other end said something that made me pause. I can't remember exactly what, but it was enough to make me doubt it was my dad. That's when things turned creepy. Bear in mind, I've been talking to this stranger who was pretending to be my dad for a good 15 minutes while sitting on my four-wheeler at the peninsula. "I can see you," he said. "You should come take a ride on my boat." My dad had a boat, but this was so out of character that I knew it wasn't him. "Dad, you're not Dad, are you?" I said. "What are you talking about?" he replied. Feeling peeved that this guy was messing with me, I challenged him. "If you can see me, what am I wearing?" He paused, then the walkie-talkie crackled, and he said clearly, "You're wearing an orange shirt, you have red hair, and you're sitting on a four-wheeler right by the swim docks. Why don't you come ride on my boat?" My eyes widened, and my blood ran cold. This whole time, some strange guy I didn't know had been watching me from who knows where. It took me about 10 seconds to scan around wildly, kick the four-wheeler into gear, and peel out so fast the wheels struggled to grip the ground. I remember them spinning on the gravel as I fought to hold on, speeding all the way home. I stopped in the middle of the yard, burst into the house, and immediately asked my parents if they'd contacted me. They hadn't, not for hours. I was in such a panic that there was no way my dad would have kept up a prank. He was a joker, but he knew when to stop. I hate to think what might have happened if I'd stayed there or hadn't realized it wasn't him. Nothing came of it, and my childhood visits to the lake resumed as normal. Eventually, those weekend trips tapered off. But the story doesn't end there. During my parents' divorce, I moved to the lake house permanently with my dad until we could find something better. It was our only option after he left my mom, but that's a long story I won't get into. My dad had health issues at the time, so I took a job at a nearby gas station and tobacco bar to cover our bills while he recovered. Thankfully, the lake house only had electricity, water, and internet bills, so my small salary kept us afloat. I worked there for just 3 months, but those were the creepiest months of my life. Within the first month, a tall, burly man became fixated on me, and he couldn't have been creepier. He had a short crew cut, a slightly unkempt beard and mustache. The first time we met, he stared at me with wide, intense eyes, ordered his gas, and stood there for 2 or 3 solid minutes, just staring. When I asked if I could help him, he said nothing. I worked on the gas side of the tobacco bar, basically in a glass box with an opening to take money and hand out cigarettes, which I was incredibly grateful for. Several times when this guy visited, he'd leave to pump his gas after staring awkwardly. But the 4th or 5th time, after I thought he was gone, I heard a knock on the glass on the other side of the booth. There he was, face pressed against the glass, grinning maniacally and waving with just his fingers. It sent me running to my manager, demanding a break before I lost it. The last time I saw him is etched in my mind, impossible to forget. He came in as usual, ordered his gas, but this time he reached through the hole in the glass and grabbed my hand before I could put the cash away. It wasn't violent, but firm enough that I couldn't pull free. As a sheltered 18-year-old, I froze. "I love you," he said, not letting go. I stared, unnerved, alarm bells blaring in my head. "Say it," he demanded. "Say you love me." I just wanted him to leave, and in my fear, I stammered, "I love you," hoping he'd let go. "Call me if you need anything." "What's my number?" he asked. Confused, I faltered, and he repeated himself. When I admitted I didn't know, he said something that made my stomach churn. "It's 911. He winked. This guy was a sheriff's deputy, the person I'd have to call for help in an emergency, like a robbery or medical issue. And he wouldn't let go of my hand. I nodded, trying not to shake so much that he'd notice. He'd never arrived in a police car, but when I told my manager, she confirmed he was a deputy. After he finally let go and left, I retreated to the back, begging to be moved from the gas station area. I didn't care where, I just couldn't face him again. Thankfully, we moved soon after, and I never saw him again, but I'll never forget that leering grin he gave me every time he bought gas. You'd think moving away would end the story, but it didn't. In college in Galveston, I had to meet with my counselor to discuss some things, which often turned into 30-minute chats since we'd grown close. My dad was there too, as he was taking classes with me to finally earn his degree. During one of these talks, I mentioned on Alaska, Texas, and our lake house. My counselor's face instantly darkened. She'd been a social worker in that area for years, and suddenly my childhood playground took a sinister turn. The sheriff's deputy became an even bigger nightmare. She told me the area was notorious for pedophilia, kidnappings, and other horrific crimes, with entire neighborhoods, including police officers, involved. People who tried to expose these crimes often went missing or were driven out through intimidation. She shared details of several cases she'd worked on, careful to omit confidential specifics, including instances of whole families being complicit. When I mentioned the deputy, her face paled, and she wouldn't say more except that she wasn't surprised. The conversation lasted over an hour and a half, and it was enough to make me swear never to return to the small town I'd once called my summer home. I also vowed never to bring any future children there. This happened back in March 2016. One day, I left my house to catch a bus to my college classes. I wasn't feeling great about my outfit, it just didn't sit right with me, and I got this bad vibe. I'd already climbed a big hill in my neighborhood and was almost out of the area when I decided to call my boyfriend. I asked him to bring me a pair of sweatpants because I felt so uneasy about what I was wearing. Within 5 minutes of hanging up, I noticed a white truck driving slowly behind me. I turned around to see who it was, and the driver pulled up beside me, creeping along at my pace. Here's how the conversation went with this creepy guy. "Hey, you look gorgeous," he said. "Just wanted to let you know. Do you need a ride?" Given how uncomfortable I already felt about my clothes, his comment made me feel like a damn prostitute. I politely declined, saying I had a ride. "You sure?" he pressed. "You look cold." I declined again, keeping it polite, saying I was fine. After that second try, he seemed to give up, or so I thought. I immediately called my boyfriend back and told him to stay on the phone with me until I got on the bus. As I turned the corner to head down a street toward the bus stop, I spotted some garden workers nearby. But then I saw the white truck again, parked right in front of me, with a creepy driver waiting. When I got close enough, he leaned out and asked again if I needed a ride, using the same lame excuse about it being cold. I turned him down for the third time, trying to stay calm. Once I finally got on the bus, I hung up with my boyfriend and called my best friend to tell her what happened. While I was talking, I noticed the white truck following the bus. He tailed us for about 15 minutes until the bus broke down, and police showed up for some unrelated reason. The second bus came, and I made it to school safely. A week later, my parents went to a show, and my brother was at work, so I was home alone with my dog. About an hour after my parents left, my dog started going nuts, barking like crazy. The doorbell was ringing non-stop, and someone was knocking loudly. I peeked through the blinds and saw the damn truck driver standing there. He didn't see me, thankfully. I called my neighborhood patrol, but by the time they got there, he was gone. They kept an eye on my house for a few days after that. I thought that was the end of it since nothing happened for a couple of months. It was May 2016, and things had been quiet. But then the last week, I was walking to Taco Bell with my best friend when I noticed a red truck driving slowly nearby. I looked at the driver, and guess who it was? The same creepy truck driver, now in a new truck. He just smiled and waved, like it was no big deal. I have no idea how this guy knew where I lived or which route I took to the bus. The whole thing still gives me the chills. This all went down when I was in 9th grade. I matured early, so from 7th to ninth grade, I got a lot of gross comments from guys. It really tanked my confidence. I went from being super sociable and outgoing to shy and awkward. I had literally zero friends, so teachers often checked in on me, asking if I was lonely or showing concern because I seemed depressed. My English teacher, Mr. Z, had the creepiest blue eyes and an even creepier smile. On the first day of school, he had us all introduce ourselves, favorite subjects, names, that kind of thing. But he kept calling on me, even though I never raised my hand and kept my head down. I'd answer quietly because everyone stared, and it made him laugh. He called me by my name and add good heart after it, which felt weird. By mid-year, I noticed he was showing me a lot of favoritism. If he took away our bathroom privileges, he'd hand me a note to take to the office and whisper, "Go to the restroom if you need to." When progress reports came out, I'd have A's on assignments I hadn't even done. I never told anyone because English was a class I had to pass to graduate. As the year went on, I started noticing he never looked me in the eyes. His gaze would drift to my chest, my legs, or the floor, anywhere but my face. When he did make eye contact, he barely blinked, which made me look away. It was so awkward. The first time I caught him blatantly staring at my chest, I didn't think much of it. I'm not exactly well endowed, so guys usually checked out but instead, I figure maybe there was something on my shirt the first few times. But it kept happening. Toward the end of the year, he started asking me to come to his classroom during lunch to help him grade papers. When I'd show up, he'd have a movie playing, and we'd watch it during my lunch break. He didn't teach a class right after, so he'd let me skip my next class too. One thing I noticed right away was that every movie had sex scenes. He'd ask if I wanted to skip them, and I'd shrug it off, trying to act mature. It became a daily thing. Every lunch, we'd watch a movie, and every movie had these awkward sex scenes. At the end of the school year, we watched our last movie. This time, the sex scene was long, super detailed, and painfully awkward. He put his hand on my leg, laughed, and said, "It'll be over soon." He kept his hand there for the whole scene. When the bell rang, I bolted. I didn't say goodbye. I just left. I'm sharing this because I saw him at Petco, where I worked about a week ago. I didn't think he'd recognize me. I was helping a line of 5 customers, while my coworker's line had only 2. He stood in my line and waited for everyone else to finish, even though the other line was basically empty. When I rang up his items, I avoided eye contact the whole time, but I could feel him staring at me. I kept my eyes down, not wanting to meet his gaze. Toward the end of the transaction, he started asking about my life. Did I like my job? How was my family? That kind of thing. I gave short, clipped answers while he stared like he was trying to burn a hole through my face. When we were done, he smiled and said, "I'll be back again, good heart." After freshman year, he stopped teaching at my school. I never found out why. Before I dive in, a bit of background might help. I'm a 20-year-old guy from the Netherlands, and I've been a geek my whole life. Video games in particular have always been a huge part of me, ever since I got my first PlayStation at age 5. There's something about gaming, whether it's the mechanics or the storytelling, that I've always loved. As I got older, I gravitated toward RPGs and eventually found myself hooked on World of Warcraft. The deeper I got into the game, the more I started joining raiding guilds, groups of players who team up to tackle the game's toughest content. The second guild I joined was hands down the best group of people I'd met at that point. One of them was a Swedish girl around my age named Maggie. We hit it off right away. It turned out her mom, who was also in the guild, lived in the Netherlands, so we'd often chat about her teaching me some Dutch while I taught her some Swedish. It was all lighthearted fun. Fast forward to early 2013. That awesome guild had fallen apart a while back, and I joined a new one. I kept in touch with some folks from the old guild, but Maggie hadn't been online much. When she finally popped back on, we caught up quickly. She'd moved in with her mom in the Netherlands, spent the last few months brushing up on her Dutch, and started attending high school here. She was also dating a guy named William, who was part of the same guild where we'd met her. He always seemed like a decent guy to me. Other guild members thought he came off as blunt or even rude, but being Dutch, I chalked it up to cultural differences and didn't mind. By June, Maggie and I had both finished our final exams and were waiting for results. One afternoon while we were playing online, I suggested we meet up in person. I didn't have much going on, and since she'd mentioned struggling to fit into Dutch social circles, I thought it'd be a good chance for her to ease into things. She was thrilled and asked if she could bring William along. I said, of course, meetups are safer with a partner, and I was looking forward to meeting another guild member anyway. A few days later, we met in Rotterdam and had a blast. I showed them around the city since I knew it best, and we had great conversations, shared some laughs, and capped the day with a trip to the Euromast. While Maggie stepped away to use the restroom, William and I chatted outside. I said, "You two make a great couple." He grinned and replied, "Thanks. I damn well love her, you know. Honestly, don't know what I'd do without her." At the time, I didn't think much of it, just something people say when they're head over heels, right? Maggie came back, we said our goodbyes, and we went our separate ways. A few weeks later, our exam results came in. I passed high school with flying colors, but Maggie wasn't so lucky. She'd failed most of her exams and told me she'd be studying all summer to prepare for a redo of her final year. I offered to help if she needed it, even though I was starting college. She was grateful and said she'd let me know if she needed anything. But after that, Maggie pretty much vanished from the internet. She stopped logging into World of Warcraft, wasn't on Skype, and wasn't even active on Facebook. In mid-August, I asked William how she was doing, and he said she was fine, so I figured she was just laser-focused on her studies. I actually admired her dedication. Then, during my second week of college, everything changed. I was on the metro, flipping through a free newspaper I'd grabbed from the seat next to me. On the fourth page, a headline stopped me cold: "Swedish woman, 19, from city stab in own backyard." It took a few seconds to register that Maggie lived in that city now and was 19. The article didn't name her, but I got a sinking feeling. I texted her right away. We'd exchanged numbers during our meetup, asking if she was okay. The rest of the day passed, and I heard nothing. I tried to convince myself it wasn't her, but I was scared. That evening, I went on Facebook and started typing her name into the search bar. Her page was already filling up with messages from people saying she'd passed away from her injuries. I reached out to some old guild members, and they confirmed the worst. William had stabbed her. She'd broken up with him after her exam results came back, and he didn't take it well. In the aftermath, a few of us Dutch guild members went to her city to meet her school friends, attend a memorial at her school, and lay flowers at the crime scene on behalf of everyone she'd gamed with. When we talked to her friends, we learned William wasn't the nice guy I thought. He'd been controlling during their relationship, and after the breakup, he stalked her and sent threatening texts. She'd even gone to the police, but they said they couldn't do anything at that point. Then she started dating someone new, and when William found out, he took matters into his own hands. Looking back, the worst part hit me when we were at the crime scene. After laying the flowers, we stood there for a few minutes, debating whether to knock on her mom's door to offer our condolences since we kind of knew her too. We decided against it, worried we might unintentionally remind her mom that Maggie's online connections had indirectly led to this. As we headed back to our car, her front door opened. Out came her mom with Maggie's younger sister, who I didn't know was only 6 or 7. I lost it when I saw that little girl, head down, clinging to her mom, too scared to face the drawings and flowers left at the scene. I recently found an article saying William's likely facing 20 years in prison. Honestly, William, I damn well hope you never make it out. This happened a while back when I was in my early 20s. I was working at a small costume jewelry store in my town's mall. It was nearing the end of my shift, and I noticed an older man, probably in his 50s, walking past my store 3 or 4 times throughout the day. Not all at once, just every now and then. It was odd because our store didn't exactly cater to older guys, but I didn't think much of it at first. I'm not even sure why I noticed him. When it was time to close up, I left around 6:30 p.m. to catch my bus home. It was getting dark early since winter was creeping in. I'm a pretty paranoid person, always have been, still live by stranger danger rules. Even now, when I leave work, I change into something less flashy to avoid drawing attention. I got this knack for attracting the wrong kind of attention for no reason, so I try to blend in, covering up and looking as average as possible. I was waiting alone at the town center's bus terminal when I saw him again, the same older man walking by. It made me uneasy, but I tried to stay rational. Lots of people take buses, right? When my bus pulled up, I got on, and sure enough, he got on right after me. I sat in the inward-facing seats near the wheelchair area, and he took the first seat above the steps. I could feel his eyes on me the whole ride. I kept staring straight ahead, using my peripheral vision to check if he was looking, but I didn't want him to know I'd noticed. I kept hoping he'd get off before my stop, telling myself it was just my anxious brain working overtime. When I pressed the button for my stop, I waited until the last possible second. As I stood up, so did he. My heart sank. I started walking toward the front door of the bus, and he headed for the rear exit. The second he stepped off, I sat back down. I had no clue where the bus was going after my stop, and I didn't damn well care. I'll never forget the look on his face as the bus pulled away. I've never seen such raw hate and anger in someone's eyes. It's burned into my memory like a snapshot, and it still terrifies me. I don't know what would have happened if I'd gotten off that bus, but I'm glad my paranoia kicked in hard enough to keep me on it. Back in 2001, my boyfriend Dan and I had just started renting an apartment together, and money was tight. We were both in our early 20s, and I was struggling to find a job, so I relied on word-of-mouth gigs to make some cash. I loved cleaning and organizing, so I told friends and family to pass my name and number along to anyone who needed help. Dan, his brother, and his dad all did carpentry work, also through word-of-mouth referrals. Their stories were usually tame, maybe a job at a hoarder's house or some odd cabinet design request, nothing too wild. One day, Dan got a call from an elderly woman asking if he could come by to give an estimate on finishing her kitchen. She said her husband had passed away before he could install the cabinets and countertop he'd bought, and someone from her church had given her Dan's number. He said he'd be happy to help and offered to come out the next day. She pushed back hard, saying, "This needs to be done now." That's why I called. They said you could help me. What am I supposed to do? I'm an old woman. I live alone. My husband died. Dan, who's pretty laid back, stayed calm and explained that I had his car for errands and wouldn't be back for a couple of hours, by which time it'd be too dark to visit. For context, Dan's a big guy, 6 feet 4 inches, muscular, but he's got a soft, not-so-masculine voice. The woman's tone changed instantly. In a sweet voice, she asked, was she be coming along tomorrow? Looking back, that shift in her demeanor and her insistence on him coming right away should have been a red flag. But Dan, feeling bad for her, thought she was just lonely and eager for company. He didn't see anything weird about it and agreed to visit the next day. The following day, we headed out to her place. We brought a small bouquet of flowers we'd picked up at the grocery store, thinking she'd appreciate the gesture. I was excited because her township, about 45 minutes away, was known for its gorgeous old houses and mansions. My high school friends and I used to cruise around there just to gawk at them. Her house was adorable from the outside, gray with white trim, vines climbing the sides, like something out of a fairy tale. It was a shotgun-style home, so it looked small from the front, with an overgrown lawn that added to its charm. We knocked, and a tiny elderly woman answered, shorter than me, and I'm only 5 feet. She was wearing a dirty nightgown and even dirtier slippers. She looked past Dan, flashed me a wide smile, and reached out with bony hands to grab my face. I held up the flowers to deflect and said, "Dan and I wanted to bring you these." Her smile vanished. She snatched the flowers and said, "Kitchen's through here." As she turned to lead us, I noticed a brown stain on the back of her nightgown. Dan and I exchanged looks. He made a goofy, grossed-out face, and I shot him a judgmental one, swatting his arm like, "Be nice, she's an old lady." We walked through a dark living room that smelled like cigarettes, mold, and body odor. Nothing seemed too out of the ordinary otherwise. In the kitchen, there was a closed door about 10 feet ahead leading to the back of the house. A man sat at a corner table, shirtless, hairy, overweight, with greasy hair down to his shoulders. The woman said, "This is my son, Marcus." He looked to be in his late 30s or early 40s. He didn't say a word, just stood up and took his bowl to the sink. Then I noticed Marcus wasn't wearing pants, just filthy tidy whities with holes around the waistband. I gave Dan the same grossed out look he'd given me earlier. He playfully returned a judgmental look and swatted my arm. I shot him a serious, I'm creeped out glare, and he nodded, getting it. So what cabinets are you? Dan started to ask, but Marcus cut him off, pointing at the flowers and asking his mom where they came from. She pointed to Dan, and Marcus grabbed the flowers from her, tossed them into an open trash bag on the floor, and stormed into the living room. I figured he was sensitive about another guy showing his mom attention, maybe because he just lost his dad. Maybe he had some mental disability, I thought. So where are the cabinets and countertop you need installed? Dan asked again. The woman huffed. I thought you were bringing them, sounding shocked he'd even ask. Dan, confused and a bit nervous, said, I'm sorry. I thought you said your husband bought them and you needed them installed. She stepped closer, throwing her hands up in anger. So you brought nothing. What is it you do? What are you trying to sell me? Marcus came stomping back in at the sound of his mom's distress, and another man, about the same age, appeared through the back door. Great, this guy was in dirty tidy-whities too. She told Dan she lived alone, and now we're facing two half-naked guys. The new guy froze just past the doorway, staring at me. Marcus rushed forward, stood between us and his mom, and pushed her toward the living room. Both doors were now blocked by these creepy guys. Dan slid me behind him to shield me from both of them. We've got to head out now, he said calmly, try not to escalate things. We heard the woman cackle, from the living room. Marcus didn't budge. I'll see what I can do about the cabinets, Dan said as we inched forward. Marcus barely moved, still blocking our path. I tugged Dan's arm frantically, pointing to the other guy, who now had his hand down his filthy underwear, masturbating. That's when my chill boyfriend lost it. Dan had learned from his older brother that when dealing with bullies, you say something so wild it stuns them. He screamed, veins popping, spit flying. The last person to corner me got beat to damn death. I'll kill you and your damn mom if you don't get out of my way. My boys will come and mess you up if you don't back off. Marcus looked shocked and rushed past us toward his brother. For a split second, we thought he was lunging at Dan, who raised his fists to defend himself. But Marcus shoved his brother into the back room and slammed the door. Dan and I bolted out of the house. I think the old lady was sitting in the dark living room, but I didn't stop to check. When we got home, we called the cops. No cell phones back then. They said it was bizarre, but there wasn't much they could do since no one attacked us or exposed themselves outright. We asked around, but no one knew these people or how they got our number. I don't know if they were mentally ill, if the woman lied to lure us there, or what their deal was. It was just scary as hell feeling trapped and not knowing what those creepy, nearly naked guys were thinking. Ever since, I avoid going into strangers' houses unless I really know them. My friend suggested I share this creepy story. I'm a 23-year-old woman, and this happened last summer while I was still in college, living in an apartment with two roommates. One of them, Ally, was from a city about 45 minutes from our school, so she often went home on weekends. My other roommate, Kate, and I were both from out of state, so we stayed put. When summer rolled around, Ally took an internship in her hometown and left, leaving just me and Kate. We both had internships in town, working 40 hours a week, so we only really saw each other on weekends. Our apartment complex was big, with an open layout. Everyone's front doors faced outside, no need to be buzzed in. We lived on the first floor and often left our door unlocked during the day when we were home, since a friend who lived in the complex would pop by to say hi. It was a Friday, which meant I didn't have to go into work until noon. My internship's executives had morning meetings, and as an intern, I wasn't needed. Kate, though, left at her usual 8:30 a.m., leaving the door unlocked. It wasn't a big deal. She knew I'd be up soon, and it was morning. What could happen? I was getting ready for work in my bathroom, door closed, around 10 a.m. when I heard the front door swing open. I figured it was a friend stopping by to borrow something, or maybe Kay forgot her lunch. I waited a minute for someone to call my name or raid the fridge, but it was silent. Bad feeling hit me. I poked my head out and didn't see anything at first. Then I stepped out, turned toward the kitchen, and there was a middle-aged man standing with his back to me, holding a grocery bag with something in it I couldn't make out. "Excuse me, can I help you?" I yelled. He spun around, looking shocked to see me. He stared for about 5 seconds before saying he was the maintenance guy and that we'd called about a sink issue. I immediately felt like an idiot for being so harsh, thinking Kate must have put in a request without telling me. She'd done that before. He mumbled something about not having the right tools to fix it and said he'd have to come back later. Then he brushed past me and left. It was weird. I texted Kate right away, griping about her not warning me. She didn't reply, so I kept getting ready and headed to work. Around 2 p.m., Kate called during her break and said she never put in a maintenance request. My stomach dropped. She told me to call the apartment manager's office and report it. I did, but the manager didn't seem too concerned and brushed it off. Our complex was pretty safe. The only time I saw cops was when they busted some idiots tossing beer bottles off their balcony. I spent the rest of the day convincing myself the guy was legit, just confused. By the weekend, I'd mostly forgotten about it. Kate left Friday night for the weekend, so I had the apartment to myself, which was rare and exciting. It was NBA playoff season, and our hometown team was playing Saturday night. I went with some friends to a bar to watch the game. My friends were taking an Uber in a different direction, so I decided to walk home. Taking the long route meant I approached from the opposite side of my usual path from the parking lot. From the street, I could see my windows before walking around and up a few steps to my front door. As I got closer, something fell off. Ally's window was slightly cracked open. She'd been gone since May, and it was late June. There's no way that window was open before. Then I noticed the screen looked wrong, like it had been popped out and put back upside down. I'm not one to overreact, but I knew that window was closed when I left. I turned and ran straight to my friend's apartment on the 3rd floor and called the police. When they arrived, I explained everything, and they told me to stay put until they said it was safe. 2 minutes later, they came out with the same damn weirdo from my kitchen the day before. One cop was holding a huge hunting knife wrapped in a Kroger bag. I wish they hadn't told me this next part, because it still haunts me. They found a guy hiding behind my couch in the living room, clutching that knife. If I hadn't taken the long way home and noticed the messed up window, I would have walked right in from the parking lot. I'd had a lot to drink and planned to crash in my room. I would have fallen asleep with that creep still in my apartment, and I know he wasn't just there to hang out. About a year ago, in June, my family jetted off to France for 4 weeks, leaving me to look after the house and our animals. Our place is in a weird spot, about an hour from the campus where I go to school, a 30-minute drive from my job, and 20 minutes from the main town. My neighbors and I have a few acres separating us, with the closest house a 10-minute drive away. The house is surrounded by farmers' fields, military property, and miles of BLM land, all nestled among mountains. Sometimes I feel like I'm living in a house from Courage the Cowardly Dog, smack in the middle of nowhere, with all sorts of strange things happening. If you Googled 2-story house, you get a picture of my place, except it's only 1 story. The 2nd-story windows are just ceiling space. There are lofts where my landlord planned to add a 2nd floor but never did, like they started building a 2-story house and then realized there was no room for a stairwell. We've also got a big basement and an attic. I've lived here for 8 years and always thought the layout was odd. Next to my room, there's this huge wall that connects to the living room, but my room isn't as wide as the wall, so there's just this massive blank space between them. Under my room are the stairs to the unfinished basement. Given the house's setup, it's no surprise we get a ton of birds nesting on the roof. In the summer, they flock to my room's roof because that's when the bugs are out in full force for them to snatch up. Since we feed our cats just below my room, the noise of the birds scratching and scurrying on the roof funnels right into my space. About 2 weeks after my family left, the birds started their usual scratching routine. They do it every hour or so, day and night. It's an eerie sound to hear at 3 a.m., and honestly, it's pretty damn annoying. But then I started hearing scratching and banging noises coming from the wall next to my room. I was convinced we had rats in the walls. I Skyped my mom, and she reassured me it was probably just the birds on the roof, like always. Over the next few days, the scratching and banging in the wall kept going. Finally, I decided to check the closets and basement for signs of mice or rats so I could get the right traps. I searched the basement. Nothing, no signs of rodents. Then I checked the hall closet, the only thing between my room and the living room. It's usually locked because it's packed with yard tools, my stepdad's shotgun, my archery gear, and a handgun. We keep it locked so my youngest brother doesn't hurt himself. I assumed it was locked, but I tried the handle anyway, and it opened. I figured maybe my stepdad left it unlocked in case I needed a gun to protect myself while they were gone. When I opened the closet, the first thing I noticed was that all the tools were pushed to one side, and a section of the closet wall was missing. I was freaking the hell out. I called my best friend and her dad to come check it out. I thought about calling the police, but since I live so far from everything, I figure a hole in my closet wall probably wasn't enough to get them out here. My best friend's dad and her brother showed up and used flashlights to peer into the hole. They didn't see anything too strange at first, so her dad got on his hands and knees and crawled inside. When he came out, his face was pure horror. He told us he found a dirty mattress, a pair of men's jeans, chicken feathers scattered everywhere, and a half-eaten Walmart rotisserie chicken. He called the police, who searched the entire house and found no one and nothing else out of the ordinary. My friend's dad nailed a slab of wood over the hole, and I had all the locks changed. That creepy compartment in the closet has been sealed up since. The scariest part, I work during the day and leave the house unlocked most of the time, so whoever was living in there could have come and gone as they pleased until I was home at night. We have 8 dogs, that's why my family needed me to stay home, and I never heard any of them bark during the time the banging started. That means whoever this guy was, he'd probably been in the house long enough for the dogs to get used to him. I live in a decent-sized Midwest city, about 35 minutes north of my hometown. My place is in one of those stereotypical not-so-great parts of town, but it's fine by me, rent's cheap, and my neighbors are awesome. I share the house with my best friend and his husband, who are high-ranking Buddhist monks, believe it or not. They travel a ton, so I'm left alone in the house for about 6 months out of the year. For the past month or so, I've been dealing with some really weird shit, not paranormal, but someone's definitely messing with me. A few weeks back, 2 of my tires got slashed. Okay, fine, whatever, I got insurance and roadside assistance. But a few days later, someone smashed in my car window. I drive a little baby Kia Soul, and when I went out to check it, I saw the word bitch spray painted across the back. I didn't notice it right away, but the street lamp made it glaringly obvious the next morning. Needless to say, I was pissed. The thing is, I don't have enemies. I got maybe 5 or 6 friends I hang out with every week or two, and other than that, I'm either at work or home. So I went to work that day, smashed window and all, and slogged through the longest damn day of my life. I worked 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Around 1 p.m., I got a text from an unknown number with a bunch of laughing emojis. I didn't think much of it. 2016 was peak random text era with Facebook, Tinder, and all that. So I went home without too much worry and poured myself some wine because, holy hell, it had been a shitty day. It wasn't until about 8 p.m. that I started getting really freaked out. That same random number had been texting me on and off all day, but I hadn't responded. Once I was home alone, I got a message from them saying, "You look so pretty and relaxed. I hope you enjoy that book." I was on my 3rd glass of wine reading a book at the time, so I was absolutely terrified. I called my best friend. He's ex-military and scary as hell. He's been staying with me for a few days now, and he's the only one responding to those creepy texts. The messages stopped for a day or two, but now as I'm writing this, we're sitting in my bedroom, and we just heard someone knock on my door. It's 11:18 p.m. on a Tuesday. My friend went to check, gun in hand, and as soon as he left my room, someone knocked on my window a few times. I'm honestly not sure what to do now. My best friend can't stay here for weeks, and my other friend won't be back for another 3 months. Update: I called the police on my way to work today and plan to talk to them this afternoon. Update: I went to the police station last night after work and gave them all the details. Since there's been property damage and the possibility of this person being in or around my house, they said it's now an active investigation. I tried Googling the number, but nothing came up since it's a cell phone, and I'm not sure if those are public. Facebook didn't turn up anything either. After reading through a ton of private messages and comments, I tried to pick apart my life to figure out who this could be. I've narrowed it down to one person and gave their name to the police. Hopefully, this ends soon because I'm ready to move on and not be scared shitless in my own home. Thanks to everyone for the kind words and great suggestions. I'll let you know if anything comes up. Update: after digging through my life like I mentioned, I think I've pinned it down to someone I had a no-strings-attached relationship with about 4.5 years ago. He tried to contact me 6 or 7 months back, but I wasn't interested in letting him back into my life. The creepy thing is, he not only knows where I live now, but also where I used to live, my parents' house, because he's my mom's next-door neighbor. The police haven't been much help so far, and I'm not sure what to do. If it is him, I'm not just scared for myself, but for my mom too. For the past few weeks, my sister has been complaining about hearing what she calls a phantom radio coming from her closet. She says it's an on and off thing throughout the day when the house is really quiet, but at night, it's almost constant. Sometimes it plays music, nothing she can pin down exactly, but she thinks it's kind of like old-timey jazz with trumpet or saxophone melodies. Other times, she swears she hears talking, like it's a radio show. She says there's definitely a man's voice, sounding like he's having a conversation with someone, but she can't make out the words. Our rooms are set up so that our closets share a wall. We've both torn through our closets, top to bottom, looking for anything that could be causing it. Maybe an old battery-powered MP3 player or radio. But there's nothing like that in either of our closets. I can't hear anything from my side, but when I'm in her room, I've definitely heard it. We can trace the noise to her closet, but it never gets louder or clearer no matter how close we get. She says when she gets too close, it just stops, only to start up again when she moves away. It's been keeping her up at night, and she started crashing on the living room couch some nights because the noise is relentless. Just when she gets used to the music or the talking and starts to tune it out to fall asleep, it changes and jolts her awake. She says it's like it knows exactly when to switch to keep her from sleeping. Last night, she slept in my room with me. We're two grown women. We haven't shared a bed in at least 15 years. But around 2:45 a.m., she burst into my room and dove into my bed, shaking and crying, more terrified than I've ever seen her. She said she'd been in her room trying to sleep because, for the first time in a week, it was quiet. She was just about to drift off when the noise started again. This time, it was the talking. Out of reflex, or maybe just sheer irritation, she glanced over to the corner of her room and caught sight of a dark shadow. She said the moment she saw it, it either moved or vanished. She couldn't tell if it was inside her room or outside her window. We have huge floor-to-ceiling windows on one wall of our rooms, and she couldn't figure out which side of the glass it was on. As soon as she told me, we peeked out my window, which is about 5 feet from hers, but we didn't see anyone or anything. We're pretty sure if someone was outside, we'd have heard them crunching through the leaves and sticks around our windows. Plus, there wasn't enough time for anyone to get away from the house without us spotting them. Our house sits on a big lot with a lot of open land, so there's nowhere for someone to hide nearby. I don't know what to do or say to help her. I haven't experienced anything myself except hearing the radio noise when I'm in her room. As far as I know, nothing weird has happened in other parts of the house. I'm a skeptic by nature, so I'm inclined to think her mind was playing tricks on her last night, but she's absolutely certain about what she saw. I have no explanation for the radio noises. Has anyone heard of anything like this happening, or does anyone have ideas about what we should do? Any advice would be greatly appreciated. In August, I moved into my first apartment. I just graduated from university, landed a job as a teacher, and was starting to figure out this whole adulting thing. I moved in with a longtime friend, and we had zero complaints about our apartment complex. It's really nice, not in the greatest part of town, but it's like a hidden gem. The complex is well maintained, clean, and the other residents have been nothing but friendly. If you live here, you get a remote to open the gate of your choice. If you're a visitor, you have to use a directory at the entrance to find a resident's name, listed as last name, first initial. It calls the resident's phone, and they can choose to talk to the person, let them in by entering a key code on their phone, or hang up to keep the gate closed. Honestly, I think this system probably saved me from the mess I got myself into. One night in October, I was driving home from my fiance's place. It was late, probably close to 2 a.m. I just gotten off the freeway and was stopped at a traffic light, waiting to turn left. I was in the left turn lane, and there was one other car 2 lanes over in the right turn lane. When the light turned to a green arrow, I made my left turn, and the other car, which had been in the right turn lane, swerved across 2 lanes to follow me. I thought it was weird, but I figured they might be lost, so I tried not to dwell on it. I kept driving, about to make a right turn into my neighborhood, and I was unnerved to see the car turn in behind me. Still, I brushed it off, thinking they probably lived nearby. They were driving a bit too close for comfort, but I told myself it was just my anxiety talking. I got high anxiety, so I figured my brain was overreacting. I remembered hearing that if you think someone's following you, you should make a series of right turns to form a square and see if they stick with you. But I talked myself out of it. I wish I hadn't. I sped up a little, clicked my remote to open the gate, and pulled into the complex. Again, I convinced myself it was fine. Maybe they lived here too, right? The gate opens on the opposite side of the apartments, so you have to drive through the whole complex to get to my building. I drove through quickly, ready to loop back out if the car was still behind me. But when I glanced in my rearview mirror, I didn't see any headlights following me. I laughed at myself for being so paranoid and pulled into my parking lot. As I parked and got ready to get out, I took one last look and froze. The car that had been following me was back, parked in an unreserved spot a little ways down from mine, with its headlights off. I knew I should have started my car and driven away. I knew there were a million smarter things I could have done. But in a panic, I jumped out, sprinted up the stairs, and locked myself in my apartment, double bolting the door. I grabbed a knife, ran to my room, and called my fiancé. Outside, I heard shouting, which is rare for our quiet complex. I didn't catch what they were saying. I was too focused on explaining everything to my fiancé. Then I heard more voices yelling, and suddenly it went quiet. Dread hit me like a wave. My knees were shaking so bad I could barely stand, and I was trying not to cry so I could stay alert in case someone tried to break in. My fiancé made it to my place in record time, armed with a baseball bat to help calm my nerves. He stayed the night, and I slept with the lights on. I couldn't shake the sound of the shouting. It was clear they were calling for someone, and I was pretty sure it was me. I figured the other voice was another resident telling them to shut up, given the early hour. I thought the whole thing was over until I went downstairs the next morning and found one of my tires slashed to ribbons. Then I realized I'd left some mail with my name on it in the car in my rush to get out the night before. I didn't think much of it at the time. I got my tire fixed and tried to put the whole thing out of my mind. But a few days later, I started getting calls from the directory at the front of the complex, asking to be let in. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I answered and asked who it was. Silence. I hung up and didn't let them in. They called again, same thing. And again. It kept happening for days, obsessively. Finally, I snapped into the phone, demanding to know who they were. A man answered, claiming he lived in the complex and had lost his key. He said he lived in the apartment next to mine. I knew the family next door, a woman with 4 kids, no man. And if he really lived here, he could have called his own number to open the gate. I told him I didn't believe him and hung up just as he started yelling at me to let him in. The calls kept coming. The next day, I marched to the complex office and had them remove my number from the directory. The man couldn't call me anymore, and I finally felt some peace. I told the office about the guy who damaged my car, and they beefed up security patrols for a few months. As anticlimactic as it sounds, that was the last I heard from the creep. Looking back, I know I screwed up by ignoring my gut when it told me something was wrong. I let someone follow me, learn my name, and harass me for weeks before I finally did something about it. I'm just grateful for my fiancé and the apartment staff for helping me put an end to it. For the past year and 9 months, I've been living alone, 9 hours away from home, because of my job. I'm not the most outgoing person. Aside from my gym manager and a few stray cats, I haven't made any friends in this city. I'm usually okay with being on my own, but after nearly 2 years of solitude, and with Ramadan approaching, a time that's usually festive and family-oriented in my country, even I started feeling a bit lonely. Yesterday afternoon, as I was about to leave work, I dreaded returning to my empty apartment. I've been thinking for weeks about getting a flatmate or moving in with one, so I decided it might not be a bad idea. I pulled out my phone, found a few rental ads, and saved some numbers. Once I got home, I called one of the listings I'd saved under Meaty Rent. Meaty was supposedly the landlord's name, renting out a still available room in his 2-bedroom flat. He sounded like a decent guy over the phone, and we agreed to meet near the supermarket in a few minutes since I couldn't quite pinpoint the flat's location. Still in my office clothes, I headed out and was at the supermarket 5 minutes later. 15 minutes passed, and there was no sign of Meaty. I called him again to let him know I was still there, and he said he was on his way. Soon after, a guy showed up, greeting me with this over-the-top enthusiasm, like you'd greet an old friend you hadn't seen in years. He started making small talk, casually asking questions I figured any landlord might ask. "You're not from around here, are you? Are you a student? What do you do? Where are you from?" I look younger than I am, so I thought he was just being thorough, but he felt a bit pushy. I brushed it off. After some awkward back and forth, I asked if we could go see the flat. His smile flickered into a brief, curious frown before he snapped back to his overly cheerful demeanor and said, "Yes, of course." I followed him, and as we turned the corner, he gestured to an old Renault 19. I had no idea he'd driven. I'd assumed we were walking since the flat was supposed to be close to the supermarket. I was caught off guard. I'm a ridiculously trusting person, and saying no to people is practically a phobia, but I hesitated to get in the car. In my conservative society, it's highly inappropriate for a young woman to get into a car alone with a random guy, and I'm sure he knew that too. He noticed my unease but still urged me to get in. Unable to say no, I reluctantly got in. As he drove, he kept trying to make small talk, but I was super uncomfortable, giving short, clipped responses. I was holding my phone when it lit up with a notification. No sound, just a small vibration since it was on silent. I didn't even check it, but it seemed to irritate him. His weirdly upbeat attitude vanished, and he sternly ordered me to put my phone on the back seat. I was stunned and gave him a disbelieving look. When he didn't back down, I thought maybe I was being rude, so I started to put it in my bag, but he insisted, demanded, really, that I put it on the back seat. Alarmed by his intensity, I quietly said, "No, I'm fine," keeping my phone in my hand. He pulled out his own phone, turned it off, showed it to me, and said, "See? Now put yours on the back seat." I ignored him, not knowing what else to say or do. We'd been driving for about 3 minutes, so I asked if we were close to the flat. He said yes. 2 more minutes passed, and I asked again, getting the same answer. I was getting really nervous. I asked if the woman in the other room would mind us visiting, hoping to find out if she'd be there. I didn't want to be alone with this guy in a flat. His face shifted to that same curious look, and after a pause, he said she wouldn't mind. Nothing blatantly suspicious had happened yet, but I was overwhelmed by a sinking sense of dread. Something about this man just felt wrong. That feeling was confirmed when he reached over and caressed my hand. I flinched away, startled, and finally mustered the courage to ask him to stop the car. Instead of stopping, he put a firm hand on my thigh and told me to calm down. Panic surged, but I tried to stay composed and asked again for him to stop. He ignored me and kept trying to touch me. I was freaking out, thinking I might have to jump out of the car because God knows where this creep was taking me. The car was old, from the 80s, with manual locks. I checked my door. It was unlocked. We were approaching an intersection with a stop sign where he'd have to slow down almost to a stop. I saw my chance. As we slowed, I was still fending off his hand. My phone started vibrating, and I glanced at the screen. At first, I was confused, but then sheer terror hit me when I saw the caller's name, Meaty Rent. For a split second, I was paralyzed by the chilling realization that this guy wasn't who I thought he was. He likely figured out I mistook him for someone else, but played along to keep me in his car. The car had slowed enough. Snapping out of my shock, I flung the door open and bolted like my life depended on it. I ran out of pure fear, only slowing to a walk when I looked back and saw he hadn't gotten out. He just sat there for a moment before slowly driving away. I made it back to the supermarket and met the real Meaty. I called my gym manager friend while running, and we waited for her to arrive. I wasn't going anywhere alone with anyone after that. We saw the flat, which was a dump, nothing like the pictures, so I went home, still shaken and with no hope of finding a flatmate. This happened yesterday, and I still panic when I think about what that guy might have had planned. I think it's time I learn to say no and stop being so damn naive. My childhood home was a gray stucco house on a 2-acre lot, built in 1917. My mom once met an 80-year-old woman who said that when she was a kid, our house was known as the neighborhood's haunted house. Kids often make up stories like that, but the longer we lived there, the more we wondered if there was some truth to those rumors. We spent about 16 years in that house and had our share of creepy experiences. Some had logical explanations, but others just didn't add up. If you walked into the house, you'd see stairs to the second floor on your right and a door to the living room on your left. The living room connects to the dining room, which leads to the kitchen. From the kitchen, there's a small hallway on the right with 3 doors: Jason's room, the bathroom, and directly across from Jason's room, my brother Aaron's room. This story is about something that happened to Jason when he was around 13. One night, Jason couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, trying to get comfortable, but eventually gave up and just lay there, staring into the dark. Then he heard soft footsteps pattering somewhere in the house. At first, he thought it might be our dog or cat, or maybe just his imagination. But as he listened, the footsteps got louder, heavier, almost angry or frantic, and they were getting closer. He could hear them thudding through the living room, into the dining room, and the closer they got, the more the floor shook and the windows rattled. When the sound reached the kitchen, it stopped abruptly. Then it seemed to turn around and stomp back to the living room. The heavy thuds came pounding back into the kitchen, stopped again, and reversed. This pattern repeated about 3 times. Then, once more, he heard the thing race back into the kitchen, but this time it didn't turn back. A shadow passed in front of his doorway and darted into the bathroom. Silence followed. Jason says his heart felt like it was about to explode as he stared wide-eyed into the darkness. Then he saw a shadow lean around the doorway, peering straight into his room, looking right at him. He couldn't make out a face or any clear features. As he stared, he realized the head was tilted at an odd angle, like it was floating sideways. He tried to scream, but nothing came out. Suddenly, the shadow zipped back into the living room, and everything went quiet again. Jason leapt out of bed, hyperventilating, and ran to Aaron's room, shaking him awake. Aaron said he hadn't heard anything, and neither had I or my mom, who were upstairs. Jason listened to music in Aaron's room until he could calm down. To this day, he doesn't like talking about it. My mom tried to rationalize it, suggesting maybe it was her checking on him that night, but none of us really buy that. The sounds, the way the thing moved, and how it looked, it all pointed to something else. I had my own weird experiences in that house over the years, but whatever it was seemed to go easier on me. This story still gives me chills every time I think about it.